I tried to see one. I couldn't find one. Oh, wait, there we go. All right, I believe we are live. We're on the air, so if you can hear me, we are on now because there is a severe thunderstorm warning that is set up in eastern Oklahoma. You can see in parts just west of Adair County and now clipping Sequoia County for 60-mile-per-hour winds. This line of storms has really overperformed this morning. It has been continuing to track from west to east, has not weakened much, and has produced many gusts of wind in its track. If we were to go to the storm reports, just going to show you where this line has moved. Only one, I guess, locally here, but it has moved over the last 3 hours. It's kind of very strong. And just south of Muskogee, we saw gusts around 60 miles per hour. So that was a little bit earlier this morning at 9:21, so just a half hour before we got on the air here. But we are on just because there are some strong thunderstorms, severe thunderstorms that is, that are producing wind gusts as high as 60 miles per hour. So let me go to the lightning here, kind of show you where this is. So the south end of it is near Gore, right over Gore right now. The polygon includes Vian and Evening Shade. It does not technically include Sallisaw here, but if this continues on this track, this will include Sallisaw as well. And then off to the north here, not in our area, but you can see over Tahlequah right now, headed towards Adair County. We'll continue to see as this tracks west to east if this continues to line into parts of northwest Arkansas, including Washington County. So it looks like the National Weather Service is going to extend this severe thunderstorm warning to include parts of Arkansas. Looks like the north end of that. If I'm going to look here, it looks like, yes, the warning expires at 10 o'clock, and then this will extend into parts of Arkansas, more than likely for western Washington County and far northwestern Crawford County. So if we were to show the winds here of this velocity, so you can see a pretty strong signature. Whenever you see these kind of hot whites or kind of pinks here, that's indicating that, yeah, we've got some pretty strong winds just around Tahlequah as well as Pettit there, just north of Gore, and kind of in the Gore area if we were to kind of check to see where these are at. So these are pretty strong. Now, I want to let you know that you see 84 and maybe like, ooh, those are strong winds. Remember, these are taken aloft. So you see the radar beam at the top of your screen here spinning? That's the Tulsa radar. The radar beam, as it extends outward, it extends up as well. It doesn't shine a straight line. So this is taking winds from above the surface. But what this is showing is there's strong downburst winds from this rainfall. And as it's getting to the surface, it's spreading out. It's not 84 mile per hour strong, but we've seen reports around 60 miles per hour. So it is strong enough winds to issue that severe thunderstorm warning. Now, closer to the Gore area here, now this is taken from the Fort Smith radar. You're kind of seeing at the bottom of your screen here, that radar. So if we were to take this here near the Gore area or just north of there, take it about, again, it says negative 63 because these are winds going towards the radar. And you have to signify going away and towards with negative and positive velocity. All that to say, again, winds about 50 to 60 miles per hour are definitely on the possibility. So let's check to see how fast this is going, and then we'll put out a track. Just kind of show you where these are going. So these are moving to the east at about 45 miles per hour if they were to stay on its current track. So I'm going to take it from the gust of wind, even a little bit more so out ahead of it, just so that there's enough ample warning if this stays on track. So I'm going to go just a little bit out ahead of this and continue to track this eastward. We'll go for about the next hour or so. So this is going to be 10 Killer here at 9:56, Briggs at 9:59, Eldon there at 10:02, Brushy at 10:05, Cherry Tree at 10:11, excuse me, Stillwell at 10:14, Bellefonte at 10:18, Westville at 10:24, Uniontown at 10:26, the Crawford County Speedway at 10:31, Lincoln there in Washington County 10:34, Bobcat Lake at 10:39, Alma at 10:45, Mountainburg at 10:47, and West Fork at 10:51. So this is if it stays on this line, moving eastward about 45 miles per hour, where the strongest of the winds are currently set up there in far northeastern Oklahoma, now extending into Sequoyah County and just about to approach Adair County with some pretty gusty winds, as well as some heavy rain. We'll show you what that looks like here on the radar. And you can see it pretty vividly. Let me take off this for a second here. So it looks like, yeah, there's the extension. So now the extension here is to extend a little east and then a little bit of a south dip. So this is just out ahead of Fort Smith. But if this were to continue, because it is dipping a little bit south, instead of trend of kind of strengthening to the south, this would approach the Fort Smith area, I'd say around 10:45. Because this is out through 10:45. This would take it through about 10:45 towards Fort Smith. So if we were to show you just kind of, if we take off the warning for a second here, and just to go to the line, you can see where the strong winds are. Kind of notice that green there out ahead of it. That's that gust front, we call it. And basically, you kind of get this whoosh of wind, and then behind it comes the heavy rainfall. And even though, again, it's not super impressive here in Sequoyah County in terms of the reflectivity, the winds certainly are. And as I mentioned, it continues to kind of track southward. Notice how this previous box, more of an easterly trend, and now it's kind of pushing south, more southeast a little bit. It's kind of pushing its way southward where there's no energy being taken up by anything. We already have all these storms in the north. The south, though, has been untouched this morning, so it continues to kind of spread southward and southeastward. So again, right now, this is for Adair County and Sequoyah County and just a sliver there of western Washington County and a far western Crawford County. This does not include, again, Fort Smith, but it is just out ahead of the Fort Smith area there, just across the border in Oklahoma. And these could continue to be very strong as it continues to move southeast. We're getting some reports of some wind gusts in the area. So near, looks like Cookson, Oklahoma, 60-mile-per-hour winds measured, a 66-mile-per-hour gust at times measured there. Let's see if we can get a location of these reports, because it is pretty strong wind coming out of this here. So that was, I think, the one near Tahlequah that was 60 miles per hour, but Cookson there, let's see if we can get kind of a rough approximation of where that's going to be. So that's going to be kind of right to the southwest of 10 Killer there. So this is going to be to the north of Evening Shade. So if we were to go back, let's go to velocity here. If we go to the north of Evening Shade. So it's going to be roughly between Pettit and Evening Shade, right in here. You see those dark blues? That's where there was a 66-mile-per-hour gust. So now we've seen confirmed cases of over 60 miles per hour, between 60 to 65 miles per hour, maybe even close to 70 at some points where that really dark blue is. Again, I want to reiterate that if you were just to look at the face value of this, you're going to get, a ridiculous number of 81 miles an hour. Now, it's not quite that strong because it's a more aloft, but at the surface, still pretty strong winds. Again, there's that gust front you're noticing, and that's where things are lining up from west to east as it's pushing through. So again, this is a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Adair County, Sequoyah County, and then just a sliver of western Crawford and Washington County until 10:45 this morning for primarily 60 miles per hour. Again, the bulk of this is really from Tahlequah here down just to the west of Sallisaw, kind of towards Gore. That's pushing a little bit to the east-southeast, mostly east, but a little bit to the southeast as well. So that is pushing that direction. So that's the only storm in the area right now. So if you're looking kind of just at radar here, that's the only storm in the region. It's just this little sucker right here. And this, again, has been a long-lasting storm. It's only recently been severe. If we were to back this up just a few hours, this has been trekking across northern Oklahoma into northeastern Oklahoma and has really showed no signs of slowing down. It's just been repeatedly strong and strong. So if we were to go over the last 3 hours here, kind of started there over by the I-35 corridor, and if we even take this back out the last 6 hours, this started out towards northwestern Oklahoma, so even before then, and just continued to track from west to east and continue to remain very strong. Showed a little signs of weakening here, and I thought, okay, maybe it's going to weaken a little bit and then pulse right back up, and now continues to remain here in the region, now in northeastern Oklahoma, and now tracking into parts of Sequoyah County, Adair County, and then again just a sliver of western Crawford and Washington County. So if you're just joining us here, This band of storms has been stretching from west to east through northern Oklahoma and is now in our neck of the woods. This is going to be primarily for 60 to 65-mile-per-hour damaging wind gusts. Not a whole lot of hail out of this, maybe some very small hail, like a pea-sized hail. Otherwise, some very strong winds, some heavy rainfall, and a ton of lightning. Usually when you see a ton of lightning, the storm is packing a little bit of a punch, and it certainly is as a moving approach in Adair County. And then even on the southern end, which again, not as heavy of rainfall, still some very strong winds in Sequoia County. So for areas included in this warning, again, this is going to be for areas like Sallisaw, Gore, includes Muldrow there. Other areas included is Greasy and Stillwell in Adair County. Areas like Bellefonte and Brushy in Sequoia County. Evening shades, seeing some very strong winds right now. This is continuing to track through northern Adair County. I think for the north end of the region, northwest Arkansas, Benton County, Carroll County, probably won't see any of this activity. Fayetteville, if you live on the north end of town, might get scraped with a little bit of rain, but looks like the bulk of the rain will be on the south end of town. Towards the south, Springdale northward, it looks like will be pretty quiet. Same with Siloam Springs there. So it looks like primarily going to be a central and southern Washington County storm, and then into northern Crawford County, and maybe approaching the area of Fort Smith if this continues on its trend. Now, I do want to note that, again, the strongest of it is going to be in Adair County, but look at this again, this whole little line here, this little green line, even though the reflectivity maybe not necessarily that impressive, when you see this kind of stretching, that means there's some very strong gusts out ahead of it. So those in Sequoia County right now, near Marble City, near Sallisaw, you may just see a strong gust of wind and just a little bit of rain, not necessarily even some heavy rain, but as I mentioned, this is from a storm. Cold air, it's very heavy. With how hot it is, it's quickly crashing to the surface and it's spreading out, these downburst winds we call them. So even though that there's heavy rain in the center of the storm here, that wind's still spreading out to the southeast, areas like Marble and Sallisaw, so there's some strong winds still associated with this line. So you're going to notice that even, again, in Sallisaw, just off to the west, we're seeing some gusts just east of Vian there, and maybe about 45 to 50 miles per hour, maybe close to 60 miles per hour, but the strongest of it right now is where that reflectivity is pretty strong through Evening Shade and then up to the northwest there towards Pettit, and then just south of Tahlequah. That's where the bulk of the winds are going to be. That'll continue to track through Adair County, and this is roughly moving at about 40 to 45 miles per hour. I just want to check and just kind of give an overview of this, and I want to show you later today we could see a few more stronger storms. So what this line of storms is going to do is kind of lay a foundation for more activity later today, mainly south of I-40, but kind of along and south of I-40. This does include areas like Fort Smith, Paris, Boonville, Waldron, Poteau, Heavener. So for the most part, it looks to be a River Valley-driven system, and again, this will kind of set the foundation for a little bit more activity later today. So it's not a widespread severe risk, but we could have one or two of these like we're seeing right now where the storms get a little bit, let's just say it doesn't behave and decides to give us some strong winds. So that is the outlook for the rest of the today, but I just want to go back to looking on radar here. It's just this one storm. You see a little bit of activity trying to pulse up here, areas like in Sebastian County, a little bit in southern LaFleur County, a little bit of these little specks of storms trying to kind of hang out and say, you know what, I want to get in on the action. Right now, though, it looks like if that development continues, that'll be mainly south of the area, kind of through Little Rock and then off to the south to the west. But there's a little bit of activity here. Again, there's just some energy kind of hanging out. You can see from the foundation of it here near McAllister, it's kind of spreading out and giving us a few spotty pop-ups there. So even though you might not have seen the bulk of the storms, there are a few spotty pop-ups kind of hanging out. In the River Valley, you can see a little cell near Greenwood. You get a little bit there near McCullough, just west of Fort Smith, and even a little bit of a kind of spotty pop-up there southeast of Sallisaw. So there's even a little bit of activity out ahead of this, kind of being fueled by these strong winds, this energy that's kind of bursting out, a little bit of some spotty pop-ups there through the region. So that's what we got going on right now. And again, this is something where it's not expected to be widespread severe. I'm hoping that this can weaken eventually here as it continues to move through, but it looks like for now, it does look like that these winds will kind of stay sustained. And one problem we'll have to watch for as well is, even though, yes, we're seeing some rain, the wind's out ahead of it, we just don't hope that any fires continue to burn or get initiated here. So that's another problem we'll have to be watching for as we head through the rest of the day today with these storms. So I want to make sure that we're all good on the Facebook stream and that everyone can hear us. Because sometimes you get a little bit carried away here. I'm like, all right, we're ready to go. And then it's like, wait, hold on. It looks like, okay, we're live, we're good. Okay, so we're good. So obviously we need the rain. We want the rain. We just don't need these darn winds with it. We can just get these storms without the winds, we're happiest people on earth right now because we've been bone dry. So we're getting a little bit of that answer, just not necessarily the way we want it, especially with how windy it is with this storm complex. So again, right now this is for Adair and Sequoia County. There is no severe thunderstorm watches, no watches in place because this one storm has really overperformed and honestly helping us out a little bit, hoping to continue to overperform as it moves west to east. But for right now, this is sitting again at Adair and Sequoia County. This severe thunderstorm warning specifically gets to about 10:45, and it is anticipated that this will at least hang on for a little bit longer as it goes through and crosses over into Arkansas. But for now, the brunt of it, as I mentioned, is just to the west of Adair County and for much of Sequoia County, even though, again, if you're in Sallisaw right now, you're probably seeing some pretty strong winds, even though you're not seeing a ton of rain. There's a little bit of a little pop-up there just south of Sallisaw, so you might be seeing some rain there. But in terms of, again, the bulk, that brunt of the rain, that's more so to the north, and that's where we have the severe thunderstorm warning in effect until 10:45. And not a whole lot of hail out of this. If we were to show kind of the hail track here, this is mainly a wind-driven storm. You can see the hail detector there. Didn't mean to do that. Not a whole lot going on, so nothing being picked up. This is going to be hail. A little bit maybe in some spots. It looks like their Tahlequah does show a little bit there. I do wonder if that's just kind of a reflectivity, kind of bouncing back a little bit. But just like maybe near Tahlequah is less than quarter size, so maybe penny or nickel size. But the main concern here is going to be that wind as well as the rain. So there you can see where there's a little bit of that purple there near Tahlequah. That's where you may be seeing a little bit of that small hail in there when you get these little reflectivity spikes, or hail spikes they're called. Sometimes you can get a little bit of a spike up there and you get enough of an updraft that you can get a little bit of some hail out of this. But primarily it's going to be the winds, especially looking at kind of how it's bow-shaped. You can really see from the Fort Smith radar in that leading edge, kind of through the western half of Adair County, down towards Flute Springs and Sallisaw. There's that leading edge, and you're going to see probably a pretty decent shelf cloud kind of coming through. Basically, it kind of looks like you're sitting on a shelf. And then once that passes over, you can see this big gust of wind. Actually, we have Dominic Carrico with me right now. Dominic, if you could, let's see if we can see any of these clouds. If you want to turn the Fort Smith camera to the west, if you can, and then the Poto camera north, if we can see any of these clouds moving in. Dominic Carrico with us this morning. And we're hoping that we can just get a little bit of rain out of this, but again, nothing severe. And unfortunately, we are seeing that severe thunderstorm warning in effect until 10:45. So if you're just joining us, you're like, all right, what's going on? I got the alert on my phone. Like, whoa, like we didn't expect this morning. Yeah, these storms have overperformed. At least this, I should just say storm singular. It's really just this one right here, that off to the northwest near Tulsa. Yeah, some light to moderate showers, but this whole little curve here is kind of showing some pretty strong winds. These winds that, again, are crashing towards the surface. We have cold air aloft. It's really dense. It's heavy. It kind of moves wherever it wants to go. And it's sending itself to the surface in the form of some rain, but also when you have these strong winds aloft through rain, it crashes to the surface and it spreads out. So it's spreading out to the north, but then to the south, but especially where the heaviest of the bulk of the winds and rain are, it's going to be in this area right here from Adair County into much of Sequoia County, and then again, just a sliver of western Washington and Crawford County. So this goes until 10:45. We'll put another track on this here. I just want to see if there's any updates from the National Weather Service first. Looks like for now, no recent updates, but let's see if we can get any of this going here. Let me put a track on this. So again, it's roughly about 45 miles per hour, and we'll go a little bit out ahead of it just to give people a little bit of a warning in case, things get there a little bit faster. So we'll go just right out ahead of it, and we'll take it, kind of go like this. We'll take it for the next 45 minutes or so. So Cherry Tree at 10:09 here, Stillwell at 10:13, Bellefonte at 10:15, Muldrow at 10:17, Cherokee Casino at Roland at 10:22, 10:23 at Uniontown, Crawford County Speedway 10:28, U.S. Marshals Museum at 10:29. If it makes it there, downtown Fort Smith 10:32, 10:36 Caroline Cross Park, the Walmart on Rodders Avenue from Fort Smith 10:38. Alma at 10:41, Mountainburg 10:45, the Bobby Hopper Tunnel at 10:48, and Lavaca there at 10:50. So again, this is primarily for damaging wind gusts around 60 to 65 miles per hour, heavy rain, and a lot of lightning. Maybe some very small hail, but for the most part, it's going to be the winds, the rain, and the lightning. So let's go over the last hour here. Let's see if there's any downtrend at all with this storm. Obviously, we want it to be weakening. We want it to be weakening enough to where there's no damaging winds, but strong enough that it gives us some rain. So we're kind of hoping for the best of both worlds here, but no, it doesn't look like any significant downtrend or any significant weakening at this point. It looks to still hang on a lot. And another way we can look at that is the winds. What are the winds looking like? And the winds, yeah, they're still pretty strong. You can see stretching from, again, especially Tahlequah through Pettit, Flute Springs towards Sallisaw. That's where the bulk of the winds are, where this lighter white is and some hot pinks. Now, as I mentioned, again, these are more winds aloft it's going to be taking because the radar, it goes out and up. It's at a slight bend. So, you know, if it's hundreds of miles away, it's going to be roughly 5,000 to 10,000 feet in the air. It's not going to quite be what it is at the surface. But what this is saying is, hey, there's some pretty strong winds aloft, and more than likely, a lot of these are reaching the surface as maybe 55, 60 miles per hour. It wasn't the 80 that we saw earlier, but still pretty strong winds nonetheless as they're moving kind of towards, again, through Sequoia County, towards Adair County as well. So if you're wondering kind of like, okay, at this moment, am I going to see the storms? I mean, at this point, it just looks like this one complex is moving through. There's nothing necessarily that's going to be tracking in, at least immediately, but you see now there's in this area right here in the river valley, there's just kind of a few spotty storms developing. This little wave of energy is setting the foundation for this complex as it moves through. Yeah, we could see a few maybe stronger storms pop up. And that's why there is a level 1 out of 5 risk for the rest of the day today for maybe a stronger storm or two with some heavy downpours, some gusty winds, maybe some very small hail. Because as the system moves through, it's going to lay kind of some energy left over and say, all right, you guys, we can see some storms here as well. So while this area to the south, especially in southern LaFleur County, may not see this complex in particular, it may lay down some energy later today for seeing those storms. Let's see if there's any new updates. Okay, so not necessarily, no. No updates from the National Weather Service in terms of any kind of new information coming in. Okay. So Dominic, if you're still over there, you see anything on those cameras from Poto or Fort Smith? Okay, just some dark skies there in Fort Smith and Poto. So thank you, Dominic, for saying that here. Let me see if we can just kind of see kind of just what folks are seeing out there in the area. So yeah, as we're kind of looking off in Poto here, you can kind of see those towering cumulus clouds there. I mean, it looks fine in Poto, but looking off in the distance there, obviously seeing some pretty ominous looking clouds there. And then if we were to go look into Fort Smith, see anything in that direction here? Yeah, again, nothing on the horizon, at least in Fort Smith, but there are some strong winds out ahead of this, and something just flew by. Hello. Came into your living room there. Okay, let's go back to the radar. So right now, again, it's just this one warning from Adair County down to Sequoia County. Gusty winds up to 60 to 65 miles per hour. Still a whole lot of lightning out of this, so not necessarily any downtrend. Usually one of the ways we try to look for if this is weakening is if the lightning is decreasing. And for right now, looks to stay pretty steady. And we're hoping that that can decrease, but for now it is staying pretty steady as it moves from west to east. The strongest part of this storm is going to be in central Adair County, or just about to be in central Adair County, and then digging kind of through Sequoia County. Now, one thing to note is that as this line is moving through, you can see some storms now starting to kind of track on the southern edge here. Flute Springs, Sallisaw, now starting to see some of that rain. As I mentioned before, when you're looking at this storm, this line, there's some strong winds that are circling down to the southwest here, kind of towards Wilburton there, and to the east of Stigler. This whole little green line, this gust of wind. And as that gust of wind spreads out, it almost might act like a little bit of some energy to pop up. A few spotty pop-ups you can see in Bacola and Greenwood here, but it also could interact and give us some lift to create more storms later this morning into the early afternoon along the lines. Even though you're not seeing a whole lot of rain right now, we're still seeing some pretty strong winds in that area. If we were to look at the velocity, you can see maybe not as much as it's trailing off to the south, but even through Sallisaw, you're still seeing some pretty gusty winds there. Sallisaw, I reckon, probably about 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts there, maybe close to 60. The bulk of it, though, you can see between Pettit and Rocky Mountain, where you're seeing these darker blues. That's where we're seeing the strongest winds just about to cross into Adair County. So if we were to kind of pick that out, see where we got there. Again, this is aloft. These are winds aloft that are being picked up, but those are strong winds aloft nonetheless. And some of that can reach the surface, and I'd reckon probably about 60 to 65 miles per hour Well, those gusts are sitting there just southwest of Rocky Mountain, just towards Pettit, moving into Adair County at the moment. So for right now, again, the strongest of the storm there is going to be where the strongest winds are between Rocky Mountain and Pettit. They're going to continue that severe thunderstorm warning. So if you see the blinking there, obviously, again, there's no indication that this is weakening at all. So they're just continuing the severe thunderstorm warning until 10:45 for Adair, Sequoia, far sliver western portion of Crawford County, and a far southwest portion of Washington County. So that continues to remain in place there till 10:45. And for now, that looks to be the only really massive storm, organized storm, but also want to mention too, we're seeing a few little complexes here developing kind of in the Washitas here, just south of Scott County, far southern Leflore County, south of Heavener, just a little bit of some storms popping up here this morning. And then we've got some few pop-ups there near Greenwood and Bacola. Again, nothing in the way of severe right now. They're just kind of some brief downpours. But once this line towards Cowlington, west of Panama, once this moves through, that could set the stage for a little bit of organization later this morning into the afternoon. But you can see no lightning out of this at the moment, so just kind of some little brief downpours in that area. And again, in terms of behind us, there's nothing really behind us there in Oklahoma City. Nothing really for the rest of the, at least from this complex. But again, as I mentioned, this is going to lay the foundation for later today. Let's see if there's any new updates here from the National Weather Service, anything of that nature. Not seeing anything at the moment here. Let's see if, again, there's anything new we're kind of looking at here, but nothing that is kind of popping out to me. In the moment. Okay. So, again, we'll recap here. Maybe if you're kind of starting out like, all right, what's going on here? So, we have a severe thunderstorm warning in effect for Adair and Sequoia County. That is until 10:45. This complex of storms, or complex of a storm, really made it here since late last night. It tracked through northwest Oklahoma a little after 3 and continued to hang on. And now that we're getting some heating of the day, it is now kind of peaking a little bit with those gusts. We've seen gusts anywhere between 60 to 65 miles per hour. This is moving not necessarily straight due east, but east with a little bit of a south tendency. And that severe thunderstorm warning extends into western Washington, and a far sliver of western Crawford County. So right now, where the strongest winds are going to be just approaching Adair County. So if we were to show you that velocity, you're going to notice that just east of Pettit, just southeast of Tahlequah, there are these dark blues. That's where you're going to see the strongest winds through Tahlequah down towards Sallisaw. That's where the strongest winds are, anywhere between 60 to 65 miles per hour. Also with me today is Dominic Carrico. And Dominic, are you ready for me to turn on your mic? Okay. All right. Dominic, you are now live, so if you have anything to add, you see anything, let me know. Otherwise, again, we are seeing some pretty strong winds out of this. 60 to 65 miles per hour have been reported. So let's show you those reports coming out of the National Weather Service in Tulsa. So there was one near Muskogee earlier this morning. That was around 9:21 a.m. And they saw roughly a 59, well, not roughly, exactly a 59 mile per hour gust. We also had one recently just southeast of Pettit, north of Evening Shade in the city of Cookson, a 66 mile per hour gust at 9:52. So that was just about 15 minutes ago, 25 minutes ago. Can't do my math correctly. At 9:52 there. So this storm complex is very strong and has not really shown any signs of slowing down. I'm seeing some people in the comments here of our Facebook that, yeah, these winds are very strong. We've got furniture flying off. Things are going crazy here. So it is a very strong moving complex moving in. For those that are just joining us, like, all right, when's it going to hit my town? Let's check the direction here. Dominic, do you know roughly what the direction is of this storm? Let's see. It was going to the east-southeast at around 40 miles per hour. I just want to make sure that's still the case. So it looks like, yeah, 45 miles per hour. So we'll put a track on this. And
they have these storms moving due east now.
Okay. So let's put a track on this, and we'll go a little bit out ahead of the line just because I want people to give them a little ample warning. So we'll go kind of like this. Take it here to the east, and then we'll take it a little bit of an easterly trend here. So go for like the next hour. So Stillwell right now here, Bellefonte 10:21, Cherokee Casino rolling at 10:26, Uniontown at 10:31, Fort Smith at 10:36, Caroline Cross Park at 10:40, the Walmart on Rogers Avenue in Fort Smith, 10:41, so if you live near there, 1047 Alma, Mountainburg 1050, Lavaca 1054, Winslow at 1058, Fern at 1101, West Fork at 1103, the Walmart in Ozark at 1107, and Branch at 1110. So this is for wind gusts that are reported as high as 66 miles per hour, a lot of lightning and some heavy rainfall as well, and maybe some very small hail, but for the most part, this looks to be a mainly wind-driven event, and then obviously as well heavy rainfall and some lightning. So if you're wondering, in northwest Arkansas, am I going to see any of this? It looks to be, if you live kind of Fayetteville, where am I at? Fayetteville northward, I think for the most part, you're going to be out of this complex, maybe seeing a little bit of some gusts, a little bit of rain. It looks to primarily be southward of Fayetteville, kind of Prairie Grove southward, and then through Crawford, parts of, southern Washington, parts of Crawford County, then maybe the south end of Madison County. Huntsville is probably out of it here, and then continues to track to the east for areas like Crawford County, Franklin County, northern Sebastian County, and then maybe if it hangs on for Johnson and Logan County as well. So we'll keep an eye on how far this can maintain itself, because again, I expected this to weaken earlier this morning, but it has outperformed expectations all morning long, and so I would not expect anything less out of this thing as it continues to track east-southeast. Now, especially with some heating of the day, because there is a decent amount of energy out there. We're going to show you kind of the storm fuel, what we're looking at there. So there's a little bit to work with once this does load up, especially as we're getting a little bit kind of farther south here. You can see there's a lot to work with here. You can see the red and the moderate here, and it's only going to heat up a little bit more. So you can see a decent amount of energy across the region. So as of now, not necessarily any massive slowdowns in sight. Just kind of this one storm that's been hanging on saying, hey, I'm here, I'm kicking, we're doing pretty well. So that is again in Adair and Sequoyah County. Drop my clicker, very nice. Adair and Sequoyah County until 1045, and then again a very sliver of western Washington and far, far west Crawford County. Now those winds, even if you're in, Sallisaw here, or you were in Sallisaw, you can see that as this line continues to move east, let me take off this warning here. If we watch over the last hour, notice as this line continues to track west to east, put a loop on this here, notice how it's kind of extending a little bit south. That's going a little fast. Let's slow it down a little bit. It's extending a little bit south. So the line initially, if we were to go through evening shade here, Sallisaw, not a whole lot of rain there in Sallisaw, right? Some gusty winds, but not a whole lot of rain. But as that line moved through, now some storms kind of tacked onto it. And now you're seeing it a little bit just west of Fort Smith as well, southeast of Sallisaw along the river, is that as the line moves through, there's a little bit of energy. It's kind of spreading out and saying, okay, this southern area, we haven't seen any storms yet this morning. Let's tack on a little bit more. And it kind of continues to stack southward. So for those that live south of the line, I would say, even if you're not in the warning, we could see some storms like in Fort Smith. That's why it has a little bit of a south tendency, because it's kind of tacking on to these storms. If you live north, and as of now, that does not seem to be the case, because as that cool front moved through last night, it's kind of pushing the storm tracking a little bit more south. Not necessarily due, obviously we mainly due east, but a little bit more south than it is north. So that's where the bulk of the rain is, and you can see why it's a wind-driven line. See that green line? That's where the gust front is, we call it. So basically out ahead of the main line of storms, you get this kind of whoosh of wind. Sometimes you get some really impressive shelf clouds out ahead of it. Basically, you kind of see like a stack of clouds that move in. As they move in overhead, then the rain starts pouring and the winds start to shift. You can almost see it, especially if you have like a flag, let's say on the top of a building. Right now it's moving more out of the north, but as this moves through, you're going to see a big kind of change in the flag. You're like, oh, now it's moving out of the west. So kind of cool as that moves through if you're able to kind of watch that. But those are the winds right now, or that's the main line right now. And again, those winds still fairly strong moving through kind of the Muldrow area. Probably Muldrow, those winds probably picked up in the last 5 minutes, seeing some strong winds. Again, approaching areas like Uniontown and Crawford County, Fort Smith, probably going to see some gusty winds as well. It looks like the bulk of the winds still in greasy, brushy, moving towards areas like Uniontown and parts of northern Crawford County. But in terms of, Fort Smith, still can see some pretty strong winds there, as Muldrow can see some gusty winds as we speak. So as I mentioned earlier, northwest Arkansas, if you live in Fayetteville North, probably not going to see much of this complex. Maybe a few spotty storms, but not much of this complex. Huntsville area, no. Again, Rogers, Benton County, Carroll County, probably seeing just maybe some spotty storms. This is mostly going to be south of Fayetteville into kind of the southern part of northwest Arkansas, and then areas kind of along I-40, a little bit south of there, and then northward. So that warning just got trimmed just to say, hey, we're updating it. Now the strongest of the winds are a little bit farther east. So that was the only update that I saw to this for the National Weather Service in Tulsa. So right now, still some pretty strong winds. We're to kind of tape this, yeah, again, 75 miles per hour. You might be thinking, okay, A, why is it negative? And B, it's really strong. You've been saying 60 to 65. Remember, this radar beam, it points up. So as it goes out farther from the radar, it goes in distance, obviously, but also in elevation. So this is more in the middle of the storm, but still, as it gets to the surface, probably seems 60 to 65 mile per hour wind gusts in there. So some pretty strong winds there in the region. As it continues to track east, and right now, still no strong indication that it's weakening at all. And heading towards areas, again, if you're in Muldrow right now, seeing some pretty strong winds. Remy there, Fort Smith area, probably in the next 20 minutes or so, seeing some strong winds. Crawford County Speedway, Van Buren, again, probably about 20, 25 minutes there. Barling, we'll see it's just on the south end. Lavaca just on the south end. Bacola could see some gusty winds because we've seen some storms kind of span off that. You can see kind of just to the east of Collington, up towards Collington Spiral, probably seen some gusty winds there. Maybe not the strongest of winds, not severe winds, but pretty some gusty winds there. And you're not maybe seeing the bulk of the rain. But what you are going to be seeing is again, this front, this gust front, as it's moving through. Notice how, again, this green extends out. There's still going to be some gusty winds out of this. And eventually, as it passes, maybe you do see a little bit of some storms starting to form off it. Because you can see it there, southwest of Muldrow, a little bit of heavy rain producing. So even though, it doesn't look that impressive, what this is showing is hey, there's some pretty strong winds passing through. So areas like Spiro, Panama, that's going to probably be seeing some pretty gusty winds here in the next few minutes just because of this gust front that is spreading out even well south of where the heaviest of the rainfall is, which is where the strongest of the storm is. So even though, again, it doesn't look, you might look at radar and might be like, that doesn't look that impressive. It's more so this wind out ahead of it that is really impressive. And then the strongest of the winds right now are going to be, again, where the heaviest reflectivity is, kind of near towards Greasy, Cherry Tree, and then up towards Stillwell. So that gust front there is just about to approach the Arkansas-Oklahoma line there in parts of western Crawford County, and then just approaching Washington County as well. So this little gust right here, kind of towards Cedarville there, probably going to see some strong gusts here in about, I'd say, 5 to 10 minutes. Bellefonte already seeing some strong winds there. Muldrow seeing some strong winds move through. So Sallisaw, just saw a report there, about 45 to 55 mile per hour gusts. So even though, again, it's still not very impressive on radar, you might be seeing this and you're like, oh, that's not a lot. Just reported 45 to 55 mile per hour gusts. So not quite severe level, but very close to it. Severe thunderstorm warnings 58. That's pretty darn close. There is a mention as well that it looks like for the Fort Smith area, they might trim off this southern half, the southern part where the reflectivity isn't quite as strong, into what's called a special weather statement, which means it's just below severe criteria. That being said, if I'm in Fort Smith and I'm out and about, I'd probably get inside because even 45 to 55 mile per hour gusts, those are still pretty strong. So again, you might look impressive on radar. You might be thinking like, oh, it's nothing. But that wind, it's packing a punch as it's moving through. So let's see if there's anything new here with updates. Yeah, you can see the strongest of the storm right now is just west of Stillwell. You can see west of Stillwell, southeast of Tahlequah, where the bulk of the lightning is. That's usually an indication that it's pretty strong in that area, and the darkest reflectivity here west of Stillwell may be producing a little bit of hail. Again, the main concern isn't hail, it's more so the winds. But maybe some pockets of, I'd say, maybe nickel-size hail. I've seen a little bit of nickel-size hail there, maybe some pea-size, penny-size, dime-size down there towards Greasy. But the main concern here is going to be those winds. So let's back out for a second. Kind of reset, regather. So we'll show you radar. It's the only complex right now that is severe. There are a few kind of little storms just off to our south here in the Ouachitas, just south of Ouachitas there towards Little Rock, producing some rainfall. Nothing severe though, but kind of all along this line, kind of setting the foundation of saying, hey, there are a few spotty storms here that could have some brief downpours, maybe a brief gust of wind, but the main storm here to watch is in Adair County, Sequoia County, just about to cross into Crawford and Washington County. That severe thunderstorm warning is in effect until 10:45. I'd expect that at least this part of it in Adair County will be extended. Sequoia County, we'll see how far south they do extend it. As we mentioned, maybe not seeing it quite extended into Fort Smith, but even if you're in Fort Smith, still going to see some gusty winds, I'd say about 45 to 55 miles per hour. Looks like we've got our National Weather Service in Tulsa reporting a significant wind damage in Tahlequah. Trees, communication towers down, some structure damage. So yeah, these are some strong winds moving through. So near Tahlequah there, that's going to be just to the west of Adair County. That's going to be, yeah, this right here. So if we were to go into velocity, kind of go over the last hour, kind of where that strongest wind gust was. So that would have been probably right before 9:50, right around 9, 10 o'clock, or late 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. And this line moved through, very strong winds moving through there. So yeah, this is not something to mess with, even though, again, maybe this doesn't look impressive on radar. You can see those strong winds moving into Tahlequah just before 10 o'clock. And now the strongest winds sitting there in parts of Stillwell towards Greasy, and that little kind of bump there, you can see it now extending into Crawford County. You can see where that kind of bump is, little bow and arrow shape. That's where we're going to see those strongest winds out ahead of a little bit of that rain. And now extending southward, you can see just west of the Crawford County Speedway there, just west of Dora, just west of Fort Smith. So if you're in any of these areas here, I guess maybe some gusty winds here in the next 10 minutes or so. So see if there's, I know people have been commenting on the Facebook stream. It looks like, yeah, the winds are crazy. Interstate and wind sounds crazy in Sallisaw. Yeah, there's some strong winds here that are moving through. And in terms, I know people are asking about any rotation. I'm not seeing any rotation on this. These look to be strictly straight line winds because the wind right now is out of the north. And these winds aloft are west. That's a negative wind shear, basically. Because you want to, I should say you want, but usually when you have anything tornadic, it goes from southeast to west or from south to west. For these, they're going from north to west. So it's backwards. So I think rotation is not expected. What I am expecting is some pretty strong wind gusts here moving through from west to east, as we've already seen. I want to see if there's any new reports out of this in the region. I think, again, we had that, the National Weather Service in Tahlequah, no official report out of that, but hearing from the National Weather Service near Tahlequah that there are some pretty strong winds in the area. So let's go back to the radar. And again, as I've been mentioning, that's where where this green line is. That's that gust front. That's where those strong winds are. So even though if you're in Fort Smith, you may be looking at the radar and you're thinking like, this doesn't look that crazy. But it's more so the winds that are the big problem with this. Not necessarily the rain, but the winds. They're still pretty strong here, about 45 to 50 miles per hour. So we're going to probably right here a whoosh of wind, or maybe even seeing it already. See the trees blowing around a little bit. Seeing maybe those clouds. Actually, Dominic, I want to know if you want to check the cameras again, if you're seeing anything on there, especially in the Fort Smith area.
Well, in Fort Smith, the rain has come down just a little bit. There's a little bit of drizzle, but largely not too much. Now, you can see on radar that gust front, as Danny was mentioning, is just about to approach Fort Smith, and we should see a pretty good increase in the wind here in the next couple of minutes, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. I was going to say, thank you, Dominic Carrico here with us this morning. First little kind of taste of severe weather since he's been here, Willie, because it's been just so hot and dry. So, Dominic, glad to have you here. Thank you for helping out. So, in terms of what we've got going on right now, so again, we still do have that severe thunderstorm warning. I'm going to assume they're going to extend it at least for where this heavy reflectivity is, or this heavy rainfall for northern Crawford County. It's just a matter of, do they extend this for a special weather statement? But again, even with the light reflectivity, still some pretty strong winds moving through the area there. So just got a report, yeah, strong winds north of Muldrow, I believe it. You're going to see that line right there towards Remy, along Highway 64B there, seeing some very strong winds, seeing some very heavy rain through Bellefonte, Brushy, then Adair County there, seeing a lot of heavy rainfall. And this is where, again, the strongest part of the storm is in Adair County, where towards Tahlequah off to the west, that's where we saw some gusty winds and unfortunately some reports of damage. Let's go to reflectivity again. Again, what this is velocity. And all this is looking at, when you look at storm winds, you're like, all right, what is this guy looking at? There's just a bunch of colors. So basically all it is it's determining velocity. So when the radar sends out a beam or sends out a little, like a pulse, it shows and kind of looks at, okay, how fast these winds moving. So for this, the hotter the color, more so like the brighter the color, the stronger the winds. And so all this light blue here, that's where there's going to be strong winds. And you can see the little thunderstorm cloud there. They did extend that severe thunderstorm warning. Now it is in effect. You can see it more of a southerly kind of tilt. It's now more so looking to be the stronger gusts towards just south of Prairie Grove, maybe even just south of West Fork. So this does not include the West Fork. Winds low right on the edge there through Mountainburg, through the Alma there. And again, technically this does not include the greater Fort Smith area. Does include Van Buren though. That being said, even if you're just outside in Fort Smith or in Barling, maybe off to the southeast towards Lavaca, there are still some pretty strong gusts out of this, 45 to 55 miles per hour. So this isn't anything where it's like, oh, it's just way weaker. This is more so the bulk of the winds are going to be in this severe thunderstorm warning. But that being said, if you're in the greater Fort Smith area, Barling, Lavaca, Greenwood, Mansfield, I would still recommend, hey, just take shelter or at least stay inside. These winds are pretty strong as they're moving through. So let me kind of show you kind of what that warning looks like.
Got a little bit of an update for us, Danny.
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
A new severe thunderstorm warning issued here. Winds of 70 miles per hour, and that's going to be with the considerable damage tag. And we're still waiting for that to populate here, but it looks like into portions of Crawford County now, where the storms are now marching in.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so thank you for letting me know that. Yeah, so not only is it getting extended, but now it has an update of 70-mile-per-hour winds because we saw that gust of 66. We've seen no weakening trend. So we still have winds possibly up to 70 miles per hour. So that is now the new update. So thank you, Dominic. And that is until 11:15. So it includes cities like Alma, Dean Springs, Van Buren, includes just to the north of Fort Smith, but even if you're in Fort Smith, I'd still say there's going to be some pretty gusty winds moving through. Maybe not a whole lot of rain, but some gusty winds. Also includes areas, again, like Mountainburg, just outside of Winslow. But if you're in Winslow, I'd still say take shelter, or not take shelter, but necessarily just get inside. This does not include Fayetteville, does not include West Fork or Prairie Grove. If you're to zoom in a little bit further, just outside of, Lincoln, just on the edge of it there. Morrow does include the city of Morrow in Washington County, in Crawford County Speedway, Alma, and just outside of areas like Fort Smith and Pensacola, Fort Chaffee, Greenwood, Lavaca. But even if you're in this area, I'd say anywhere near this little line that's moving through, still going to see some gusty winds, 45 to 55 miles per hour. But the bulk of the winds are going to be with, you see this massive bowing segment. Let me take off the warning for a second here. It's just a massive little bulge there. You can see it basically from Stillwell down just north of Fort Smith towards the Van Buren area. There's going to be some very strong winds associated with this gust front that moves through. And there's going to be probably, again, 60 to maybe as high as 70-mile-per-hour winds. If you look at velocity here, we're now getting where this is getting closer to the radar. So although the colors may be dropping a little bit, that may be just because, hey, now it's close to the radar. Because the radar here, just to the south of Fort Smith. As that's getting closer, the winds may be looking a little bit weaker, but it's just because it's now close to the radar, so it's not quite as high in the atmosphere. So if we were to just kind of pull some readings here, again, this is more elevated, but you can see why this now got upgraded to 70 miles per hour. There's some strong winds aloft with this, and the reason why, again, it's negative is because it's going towards the radar. If it's moving away, it's positive. Moving towards, it's negative, because velocity, of course, includes the direction component. But again, some strong winds there. Over Bellefonte here, 67 miles per hour, probably getting to the surface about 55 to 60. We're to go a little bit to the northeast there, kind of even just crossing into Crawford County right now. It's about 55, maybe 55 miles per hour. So these strong winds, again, show no indication of slowing down at the moment. But for now, it is looking to be very strong with some heavy downpours. But even to the south of there, like areas like Fort Smith, let's go down to Fort Smith. Not technically in the warning, but if we were to kind of zoom in here a little bit towards Roland, you see some strong winds here, pulse that. Again, this is a little bit of a erroneous reading, but I will say that we're probably seeing close to 60-mile-per-hour winds, even though not technically in the warning.
And Danny, you're mentioning that in portions of southwestern Crawford and Sebastian, right where Fort Smith is, they've issued that special weather statement. So it's not quite severe, but it's running just below severe weather limits.
Yeah, so thank you, Dominic. Yeah, so they officially, what they did was, so the reason why Fort Smith not included, even though this warning was, they said, okay, the bulk of the winds are going to be from about Van Buren to just a little bit north there towards Stillwell. That being said, Fort Smith areas like that, Sebastian County, far southwestern Crawford County, even portions of southeastern Sequoia and LaFleur County, we're still going to see some strong winds. So I'd say anywhere, let's go to the reflectivity, because this is going to probably give us a little bit of a better look at that here. Let me show you something different here. If we were to go from about, again, Stillwell down to about, we'll even say maybe a little bit farther south towards Bacola. If you're anywhere in here, there's going to be some gusty winds. The strongest will be from about Van Buren to Stillwell, but even if you're in areas, if I were to draw like a circle here, I'd say if you're anywhere kind of in this vicinity, we're going to see some strong winds. Even, again, extending a little bit farther south where we're seeing maybe some gusts around 50 to 55. In the yellow box here, 60 to maybe as high as 70 miles per hour. So this is something we'll continue to monitor throughout the morning. We're going to be here as long as it's warned because, again, this is a pretty strong system, and it's been a minute since we've seen anything of this magnitude and just rainfall in general. I mean, we've gone through August. Fort Smith Airport has not recorded a single drop of rain. We need this rain. Unfortunately, it's coming with some strong wind gusts, but there are some strong winds that are going around. So just kind of show you again what's going on here across the region. Let me zoom out here, kind of take a reset. So this is the only complex that's in the area right now. This one in Adair, Sequoia, now kind of moving into southern Washington and Crawford County. That severe thunderstorm warning is in effect until 11:15 for up to 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. Maybe some very small hail, but mainly going to be those wind gusts. For those just southeast of the area, or those southeast of the area in kind of southeast Scott County, a little bit of a complex there. Nothing really going for the moment, though. But this whole line right here, as it moves through, you can see even some gusty winds down towards Poto. This could lay the foundation for maybe more activity later this morning or into the afternoon. And that is why the Storm Prediction Center has a level 1 out of 5 risk for us south of I-40. So once this moves through, maybe it leaves a little bit of energy left over for redevelopment. So if you're in northwest Arkansas, especially in Benton and Carroll County, I'm not expecting much redevelopment or just development at all later today. But the farther south you live, I'd say has the better chance of seeing not only redevelopment, but just additional development from what we're seeing right now. But the bulk of that storm, again, is currently sitting in Adair, Sequoia, and now moving into southern Washington and a bulk of Crawford County. Here to kind of show you where the winds are kind of going right now. Let's take this warning off for a second. So the strongest, the kind of gust front there is kind of moving just west of Winslow through kind of where the Crawford County Speedway is, just west of Alma and probably Fort Smith. Probably seeing some gusty winds right now in Fort Smith. Let's take an eye on, look at that camera there, a couple of cameras in Fort Smith, see if we're kind of seeing anything at the moment, because we're probably seeing some gusty winds and maybe just a little bit of rain. But that's the thing, there's not a whole lot of rain. So you're seeing a little bit there on the camera, but it's not a ton. And that's because it's just the winds purely are just what's producing these very strong gusts as they're moving through. So you can see that there in Fort Smith. See if we're just going to look at the Marshall's Museum there along the river. Seeing anything in that area. Looks like, oh, we're seeing blackness. Well, that's not good. Hopefully Marshall's Museum, hopefully that camera's okay. But maybe just some gusty winds kind of knocking out communications there. This camera, maybe a little bit of a, kind of shaky cam for Hollywood, but yeah, there's some gusty winds here. There's no doubt about that. You can see the trees rustling for sure. Yeah, there's some gusty winds rolling through Fort Smith right now. There's no severe thunderstorm warning, but 50 to 55-mile-per-hour gusts are not out of the question in the region. So there's still some gusty winds, but you notice not a ton of rain. Yeah, there's some rain. There's almost like a mist or a drizzle, but it's more so just these winds are strong as they're moving through Fort Smith. So there are some gusty winds moving through the area as we speak. See that in Fort Smith, and you're seeing as some showers are rolling through. It's almost blowing sideways, right? It's not even blowing from top to bottom. It's blowing sideways across your screen. So that's what kind of an idea of what you can expect as the storm rolls in, is that you're going to see some strong winds. And that's an idea of, hey, they're going to be pretty gusty at times, around 50 to 55 miles per hour on that end, but maybe up to as high as 70 miles per hour in the warning. So the strongest of the system right now is going to probably be where it's jetting out the most. So I'd say over Uniontown right now, the Crawford County Speedway just west of Mountainburg. Let's look at some of this velocity here and kind of see. You can see where that's kind of jetting out a little bit. Just kind of test these values here. Again, about 60 miles per hour. I'd say that's a pretty fair estimate there. If we go a little bit farther to the west with some of those velocities, again, I want to reiterate that at 97 miles an hour, it's not that fast, but you notice how strong these winds are. Again, these are downburst winds. So basically, when you have heavy rainfall and very cold air aloft, it just sends its way to the ground and it spreads out. So no, 97 miles per hour is not happening at the surface, but 65 to 70 miles per hour, yeah, that's a real possibility. And that's, again, the reason why we're saying, okay, it's not 97. The reason why it's picking up 97 is because, again, the radar beam, as it goes out from Fort Smith, so for you to take you from Fort Smith radar, it's probably about 40 miles away from that spot. The radar beam has a little bit of a tilt, and as it goes out in distance, it also goes up in elevation. So it's catching a little bit higher in the storm than at the surface. But that being said, it is pretty strong winds at the surface, again, about 65, I'd say, to 70 miles per hour. Now moving through southeastern Adair County and western Crawford County, so Uniontown, the Crawford County Speedway, probably seeing some very strong winds at the moment. Bellefonte experiencing some really strong winds. We've had numerous people kind of on the stream here seeing that, yeah, it's pretty windy out there in the area. So let's see, Dominic, if you mind, seeing if there's any power outages out of this this complex for Sequoia County, Adair County, or just anywhere kind of in the region. So while he's looking at that, see if there's any new storm reports here to share along with you. Nothing new here, but again, that's still watching that gust front kind of move through. So let's kind of back out here a little bit. Look to see if that reflectivity south of Waldron there. So just kind of a little line of storms there. Nothing too crazy at the moment. I wouldn't doubt if maybe this eventually develops into something, but that'll stay to the southeast. Just watching that this kind of little shape here in LaFleur County, this kind of bottom end of it, moves through. Does that develop anything later today?
All right, well, Danny, these storms are crossing right now into Arkansas, but as they move their way into eastern Oklahoma, you know, we had some reports of damage there. And in terms of the power outages that we're seeing in Adair County, it looks like roughly 1,800 customers without power right now. That seems to be the only county where we're seeing at least any widespread outages is in Adair County.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Dominic. Yeah, so Adair County, that's where the bulk of the winds are. And I'd expect, unfortunately, probably some power outages, probably in Sequoia County because there's some pretty strong wind gusts, and maybe even in Crawford and Sebastian here as those move through. Again, this is the only storm complex that's severe. Off to the north, could see a little bit of rain move through into northwest Arkansas, but the main, at least northern northwest Arkansas, but the main bulk of this is going to be between about Fort Smith, just south of Fayetteville, kind of around West Fork southward. So it looks like they trimmed this back. It looks like they're going to keep the winds at 70 miles per hour. That's the primary concern. And I'll continue to look for maybe some hail moving through as well, but it does not look like we've seen a whole lot of hail out of that. The bulk of it would be kind of where the reflectivity is the highest, and you're Stillwell here. This is probably going to be, again, about penny to nickel, so maybe up to quarter. Again, I think the primary concern is going to be winds, but maybe some small hail mixing in here as well. So let's look to see if this added any. Okay, still moving to the east at about 45 miles per hour. So let's put an additional track on this. You get some areas like Franklin and Johnson County. We might be thinking like, okay, what's going on, guys? Like, is this going to reach us? Again, right now, this thing is hung on for the whole morning. This has gone since late last night, really. It is hung on. It is not going anywhere anytime soon, and it continues to be very strong. So let's zoom out a little bit, and let's take this. Let's go just out ahead of it. So I want to give a little bit of an additional warning too. And I'm going to take this down to about Greenwood, because even though it's not severe in this area, there are still some pretty strong winds, and I want to, keep that in consideration. So we're going to go all the way to about Clarksville here. So Mountainburg, 1049, Lavaca, 1052, Winslow, 1059, Charleston, 1105, White Rock Mountain, 1108, Ozark at 1114, Cass at 1119, Paris at 1125, Horsehead Lake at 1129, St. Paul, 1133, Cove Lake at 1138, Clarksville, 1141, New Blaine, 1147, AM Arbaugh there at 1151, and the Arkansas Nuclear One Power Plant just outside, close to Russellville, at 1159. So that is the current track of this storm, moving roughly to the east with a little bit of a south trend at about 45 miles per hour. The main concern here is going to be those damaging wind gusts up to 65 miles per hour, along with some heavy rainfall, some lightning. But even on the south end of the storm, as I keep mentioning, there's still some pretty strong winds, even with not a whole lot of rain. We saw there in Fort Smith, the winds are still very strong, even without the rain. It's just this air that's aloft that's really heavy and cold and dense. It's just rushing the surface and spreading out. So that's why we're still getting those strong winds, even with very light rainfall in some areas. As I've been mentioning too, it is as it's moving through, kind of giving off a little bit of rain. So you notice as this line moves through, a couple of pockets of some moderate to heavy rainfall there just south of Fort Smith towards Greenwood. So a little bit of some rain kind of moving through there. Let's see here. See if there's anything additional here that has been added to the chat. Looks like nothing new in this moment. So that's the current track here. And it looks like, Dominic, I want to say that they issued a mesoscale discussion, but I do think the chance of a watch is pretty low, right? Yeah, it looks like 20% there. Okay. So we were talking about maybe, was a severe thunderstorm watch be issued? It's unlikely just because it is this one complex. And once this moves out, I think the redevelopment of severe weather is unlikely, but we could see an additional storm later today. And for that, we'll show you again what that could look like later today. So there is a level 1 out of 5 risk as these storms move through, maybe additional redevelopment either later this morning or during the afternoon of maybe some brief downpours, gusts of wind, and small hail like we're seeing right now, and maybe 1 or 2 becoming severe. This would mainly be south of I-40, where storms haven't already happened this morning, or at least where this current complex is just a little bit south of there. So we'll have to watch for that later today, but if you're in northwest Arkansas, looks to be pretty unlikely for any redevelopment. Primarily looking at this complex, and then of course what could redevelop later today, but even that later today looks to be kind of hit or miss. So let's see, okay. So you can see the lightning. Again, that's one of the indicators to keep looking at is the lightning going down. And it just really has not. It's kind of sat around that 250 to 300 mark there, just behind my big noggin there. Fortunately, my head blocks a lot of things. I apologize. It's just filled with a lot of hot air. I got to be able to kind of meander around it. Anyway, that's not the point. The point is that there is a lot of lightning out there. There's a lot of heavy rain as well. And that's where you start to look at if it's weakening. You look at the rain. Has that been going from reds to oranges and yellows? Unfortunately not. And the lightning, is that ticking down? And that's staying about the same. So no real looks of any weakening here anytime soon. And even out ahead of it, where that line continues, again, you can see a little bit of a burst of rain there just to the northwest of Greenwood, kind of where the radar is. Now you might be wondering, okay, so just to the west or east here of the Choctaw Casino Pensacola, you're seeing like it's really blank here. And you're like, why is it not raining around the radar? Well, the radar, this is called the radar dome, the cone of silence, or the dome of silence. Basically, that when the rain sits over the radar, it can't necessarily look straight ahead and go, all right, what's going on? The beam only goes up so high. So that's why it looks like it might not be raining at the radar site. If you kind of live near Bend Gearin Park there, you might be thinking, well, it says it's dry, but it's raining. That's why the radar, sometimes when it's right overhead, and it's that cone of silence, basically you don't see any rain, but right outside of it, it can get it. But when it floats overhead, you're going to see a little dry pocket there. But out of this little pop-ups here, you're not seeing, again, any lightning. So they're not very strong, but there are some brief downpours kind of extending off this line. But it is that main line there that winds are pretty strong. So you can see Alma right now, Kibler, Dean Springs, probably seeing some very gusty winds right now. Dominic, if you don't mind, on that traffic computer there, see if Alma or kind of anywhere along I-40 there between Alma and Mulberry, see if there's any gusty winds or anything you can pick up on the camera. Thank you. Okay. So let's see here. Yeah, no new reports of anything. Again, we did have that very strong wind. Actually, we do have something new that came in from, it looks like in Muldrow, law enforcement reported a power pole snapped northeast 1st Street in Muldrow. So probably more than likely some power outages somewhere in Muldrow. Looks like, again, some power outages there. Northeast 1st Street in Muldrow reported by law enforcement there. So these winds are going to be strong enough, unfortunately, to knock out some power. Those power lines, again, 55 to 60 miles per hour, even though we've been very dry, it's still strong enough to knock over those power lines. That's the one thing about this that might be a little bit better, that the ground's pretty dry, so it's not soaked. When you have a soaked ground, it's a little bit easier for things to be uprooted. When you get gusts over 60 miles per hour, a lot of things can still be uprooted pretty easily.
We'll have a look here, Danny, at our RDOT camera in Alma, and you can see, we're not terribly, it's not raining at least heavily at the moment, but we're seeing some very gusty winds there. This is along Interstate 49. We have folks traveling on the roads, and you can see kind of that debris or leaves kind of flying through the air. Probably seeing some wind gusts, Danny, here, let's say around 40, 45 miles per hour.
Okay, yeah. So see, the banner there was wrong, so don't ignore that. Can you tell me what then the camera was?
Excuse me here. This is exit 21, Column Lane along I-49 there.
Okay, thank you, Dominic. Yeah, so this is going to be right before that I-40, I-49 interchange. And yeah, as he mentioned, yeah, not a whole lot of rain out of this, but some pretty decently gusts of wind. If you kind of look to my left here, I guess my right, but for me to my left. Anyway, that's not the concern. You can see those trees again kind of brustling in the wind a little bit. So yeah, some pretty gusty winds, but as Dominic noted, there's not a whole lot of rain with it. So again, even if you're looking at radar on that south end especially, you're like, well, it looks like light green. I'll be fine. Yeah, you might not be under the severe thunderstorm warning, but I mean, look at that. Now the camera's shaking a little bit. There's some pretty gusty winds coming out of this and not a whole lot of rain with it. That's that gust front we've been talking about. And you're going to be like, all right, now by the end of this, I'm going to know what a gust front is. And it's that line of wind that comes out ahead of it, and you probably going to see some sort of impressive cloud structure, and it moves overhead. It's whoosh. You get some very strong winds. So you're noticing here in Alma, pretty gusty winds kind of moving ahead, or just north of Alma, kind of right before that I-40, I-49 interchange. So let's go back to the radar. Thank you, Dominic, for pulling that up. Dominic Carrico with us this morning. Get his little first taste of Arkansas and Oklahoma severe weather, because since he's been here, it's been very hot, it's been very dry, and man, I'm sure this feels good once it passes, because that's one thing I want to look at. Let's see the temperature difference in Sallisaw. If we can get that, let's see. I'm curious what the difference is in temperature as that moved through, because yeah, 75, whew, that feels nice. 75 in Sallisaw as that passed through. Still in the upper 80s to about 90s everywhere else. Yeah, I would take 75 right now. Unfortunately, with how hot it is, it's just going to burst back up into the 90s once that passes. But yeah, you can see that cools us off about almost 20 degrees. Because Poto there is still 97. So yeah, that cools us off about 15 to 20 degrees. So this is what we've been looking for, just not, unfortunately, not the rain aspect, or the wind aspect of it. We've been wanting the rain, we want the cool down, but of course not these winds. So now the bulk of it here, you can see sitting firmly in Crawford County as well as southwestern Washington County. That's where the bulk of the winds, the lightning, heavy rain is. So if you're in Mountainburg, probably seen some pretty strong winds. And that was right before where we saw that wind. So I'd suspect if we were to kind of look a little bit farther north, actually, Dominic, if you don't mind, put up the Mountainburg camera on the RDOT, we'll probably see some pretty strong winds there and probably some pretty heavy rain here very quickly. But that's where those strong winds are going to be at the moment. The strongest winds going through Mountainburg, kind of just west of Alma there, or just east of Alma, excuse me. That's kind of the gust front. And then if we were to look at the velocity itself, you can see that's where there's some pretty gusty winds moving through kind of aloft. So again, we're pull this about 60 to 65 miles per hour. Again, that's a pretty good estimate that now that that's pretty close to the radar, it's probably a pretty decent estimate of that. And some people might be wondering, again, have we seen any rotation out of this? We are not expecting any rotation because, as I mentioned, wind shear, when tornado development is more favorable, it's when you have a wind at the surface going from about the southeast, and then it spins to the west aloft. This is west aloft, but to the north of the surface, so you're going backwards. When you have backing winds, that is not favorable for tornado development, which is good. We don't want that, but it does not. We're not expecting rotation out of this. We're mostly just expecting just very strong straight line winds. Looks like here, yeah, some more damage here. Yeah, some more damage here coming out of Muldrow from that the wind moving through. And let's see. Curious if that's going to show up here on the storm reports. Yes, so there is that damage there in Muldrow. There's the damage in Tahlequah that came through earlier. So just kind of a recap of the damage that rolled through. So these winds, pretty strong as I moved in, 921, about an hour and a half ago. Muskogee, just under 60 mile per hour wind gusts reported there. Then just to the south of Tahlequah there in Cookson, which is in Cherokee County, 952, 66 mile per hour gusts. And at about that same time, we were seeing reports in Tahlequah. We've gotten from the Oklahoma Forestry, let me move out of the way here, numerous large branches or numerous large trees blown down, communication towers blown over, some structure damage at the Tahlequah office, about 9:55. So some pretty strong winds moving there, and I'd say probably roughly about 65, 70 miles per hour, some damage there. And then now that coming out of Muldrow in Sequoyah County, I'll move out of the way for this one. That is going to be some power poles snapped as that gust front moved in. Again, that's where that strong wind's going to be. It's going to go whoosh, coming in at about 10:20 from law enforcement there with that power down in that area. So power outages in Muldrow right now. And then a new report just came out of the Stillwell area, just to the southwest there near Marietta. Seen a tree snapped with a large limb down, about 10:25. So yeah, some pretty strong winds moving through this area very quickly. So let's recap here. Let's reset. Let's get all of our things in order. So severe thunderstorm warning in effect for 11 till 11:15 for southern Washington. The bulk of it here in Crawford County, but then also even a little bit of wind outside the severe thunderstorm warning extending into Sebastian County, where winds could be about 45 to 55 miles per hour. This complex continues to track to the southeast there toward Little Rock. That'll stay to the southeast. It's this right here that we're mainly concerned about moving through. It also looks like Fort Smith. Again, 49 knots. Okay, knots, Danny, English. That's about 55 miles per hour. So that's, again, not necessarily severe in Fort Smith, but it's still very strong winds moving through. But the bulk of that wind, again, is currently sitting in Crawford County over Mountainburg, Alma, just to the southwest of West Fork there, over Morrow, headed towards the Winslow area. And continue to rain very heavily there in Crawford County Speedway, Alma, Mountainburg, and then even in the Fort Smith area, even though not a whole lot of rain, still some very strong winds. And you can see where that gust front is. Areas in Mulberry right now, going to see some very strong winds very quickly, if not right now. Lavaca seeing some strong winds as that gust front moves through. Off to the north, they're going to just pass Mountainburg, Lake Fort Smith State Park, White Rock Mountain area there in Franklin County, and then even through, again, Greenwood towards Dayton there in southern Sebastian County, seen some gusty winds. Even though not quite the strongest, still seeing probably some pretty strong winds there down towards Mansfield, about 40 to 55 miles per hour. Dominic, do you have that camera pulled up?
Yeah, we've got some very gusty winds here right outside the community of Mountainburg.
There it is.
And more of a wind-whipped rain on this camera lens. Certainly more rain coming down than we were seeing earlier as these storms continue to move off. Now pretty much due east as they scrape southernmost Washington and northern Crawford County.
Yeah, no, thank you, Dominic. Yeah, you can see a little bit of a different picture now. You're seeing these really very strong winds in Mountain. This, again, I-49 at exit 29 near Mountainburg. You can see very strong winds there moving through the area. So very strong winds, looking like a lot of rainfall there as well, obviously. But this is where, again, that kind of bulk, that center strength of the system is, where not only are you seeing the rain, but a lot of lightning as well and a lot of rainfall. So that was going to be, again, right there near Mountainburg in that area right here where you're seeing a bulk of that rainfall. But even if you're outside of this rain, like for areas like, Mulberry, Lavaca, still seeing some pretty strong winds along this gust front. And as that gust front pushes through, it is producing a few little pop-up storms. Nothing severe, but some gusty winds still about 45, 50 miles per hour. And even as it pushes southeast, I would still suspect that areas like, Logan County and Scott County, maybe to see some gusty winds. Okay, so with recent reports coming out of Fort Smith, coming pretty close to 60 miles per hour, they've now extended that kind of along the gust front. We've been talking about, they've been extending that along the gust front. So now they've extended it to include most of Sebastian County, all of Franklin County, and far southern Madison County to include the city of St. Paul. That is until 11:45 for 60 mile per hour winds. So we've not seen any recent reports of over 60 miles per hour. So that's some good news there, but still could see it exceed it very briefly. But for now, it is looking like it's going to be 60 mile per hour winds for all of Franklin County, the rest of southeastern Washington County, southern Madison County, and then now they did extend that to include areas like Greenwood and Charleston, Lavaca, where, although it wasn't previously severe warned, we've seen some gusts come pretty close to 60. And technically, the severe thunderstorm warning is 58, so it is still pretty strong in that area. So that is where it's at right now. Let's put a track on this, just an update for you, and let's just kind of give you an idea. If you're in Franklin County, starting to see that wind, that gust front start to creep in. So let's talk about where that is heading your direction. I want to just make sure the speed, I believe it's still 40, and now it's 40 miles per hour. Not that much slower, though. So let's take this track. We'll go a little bit out ahead of it. We'll take it again east, a little bit southeast there, towards the region. Okay, so Charleston at 11:07, White Rock Mountain at 11:11, Branch at 11:14, Ozark at 11:20, Cass at 11:23, Paris there, 1133. Horsehead Lake, 1136. St. Paul in southern Madison County there, 1139. Cove Lake, 1144. Clarksville, 1151. Lamar, 1157. New Blaine at 1158. Hickeytown at 1205. London at 1212. And then again, that Arkansas Nuclear One power plant, which is just outside Russellville, at 1214. So this is for 60-mile-per-hour winds. Some heavy rainfall on the northern and central part of it, but if you're in the southern area of it, like in southern Franklin County, or like Charleston, or if you're in Paris and Logan County, New Blaine, it still could be pretty gusty. Those winds can still be very strong, even if there's not a whole lot of rain. So this is, again, don't be fooled by the lack of rainfall. That does not mean lack of winds. We are seeing some very strong winds extended through this gust front, even without the rainfall, and it is kind of spawning off a little bit of rain as that front moves through. So it's kind of pushing through and
Danny,
producing a little bit of these pop-ups here.
Really strong winds here in northern Crawford County at our Chester camera there along Interstate 49. That's just north of Mountainburg. You can see just that wind and rain whipping across the road there. Even some folks that are parking themselves under the overpass to kind of shelter from the wind, and that's always kind of one thing we advise people not to do. It can be actually more dangerous, but that wind definitely not letting up there in Chester. That's once again just north of Mountainburg. And a little bit of an update to our power outage situation in eastern Oklahoma, Adair County, where these storms just marched through about a half hour's time ago. We're seeing around 2,000 customers without power. And in Arkansas, we are seeing in Crawford County now just about 1,400 customers in Crawford County without electricity.
All right, thank you, Dominic. And what you mentioned there is good. Okay, do not do this. Do not sit under an overpass. We're seeing again another car. Do not do this for two reasons. One is that it can almost create, especially in tunnels, which I know this is technically a bridge, but it can create kind of like a suction almost, and the winds actually accelerate underneath there. But two, and most importantly, if emergency vehicles have to get through here, do not block the way of them trying to go around you. So do not do this. Pull over on an exit, in a parking lot safely. I know the conditions picked up here, but do not sit under a bridge or an overpass because, again, you do not want to block emergency management, emergency vehicles. And again, it almost gets worse under there. But yeah, you can see, good pickup here, Dominic, just the very heavy rainfall and extremely strong winds. This is where the worst of the winds are, the worst the rain is right now in that Chester area. This is going to be about roughly exit 34 along I-49. You can just see visibility is very low. I understand, I get why people are doing it. You can see another car there, but again, do not do this if at all possible. Do not sit there under an underpass and prevent people from, emergency crews from getting through. And again, it's almost creating a suction of how strong those winds are. So again, this is I-49 at exit 34 near Chester, and you can see how strong these winds are, how heavy this rain is. Again, visibility very poor. So if you're out driving here, would not recommend doing it, or at least holding off for a little bit. You can see how strong those winds and how heavy that rain is. So let's show you where that is. That's going to be just to the north a little bit of Mountainburg. So that's going to be kind of right to the north of Mountainburg there. So that's going to be kind of in this area right here where there's that very heavy rainfall. And also what we were seeing is some very strong winds. If we were to look at the velocity here, yeah, looking like that gust front is kind of like in that direction right there, kind of right in this area here where that front is just whooshing through and giving us those strong winds. So no official reports out of what wind speeds those were, but I reckon it was probably at least pretty close to 60 miles per hour given those strong winds. So you're noticing that, again, that red, you kind of see how it looks like kind of a C, almost like a wave. That's the gust front. So what you're seeing right here is that front, that gust front, where the wind initially goes again, like whoosh. And as it pushes through, that's where that wind starts to shift direction, because right now it's moving away from the radar, roughly, let's say, out of the the west, and then these pull through and then push through and give us those very strong winds. So some pretty strong winds moving through there. And let's look at kind of the reflectivity, where that gust front is. So you can see that gust front is now just passing Mountainburg, just west of Cass, west of Ozark, moving through Charleston, just past Greenwood right now. Seeing pretty strong winds more than likely in the Greenwood, Charleston areas, just east of Lavaca, seeing some very strong winds in that area. I do want to look for folks on the Facebook stream. Hopefully everyone's okay here in the River Valley in southern northwest Arkansas. But we are seeing, again, some very strong winds in the area. Looks like, yeah, Chester, yeah, getting hammered. Rudy there along I-49. So, yeah, I-49 right now, the bulk of this is just very heavy rain, very strong winds. Seen some pretty strong activity. Looks like, oh yeah, Old Uniontown Road. Yeah, seen some pretty strong winds, pretty strong rain. Yeah, and people have been mentioning, like, yeah, it's, in Fort Smith, not a whole lot of rain, but it's very strong winds. Yeah, we're still seeing that kind of in this whole severe thunderstorm warning.
That's a
So
good point. Those winds, it may not be associated with a lot of rain, Danny, but even in Fort Smith, we just recently got a report here of 49 knots. That's roughly about severe limits, like around 56 miles per hour. So that's right around severe warning criteria.
yeah, and this is, I'm kind of pointing this out here. So again, this little green line, that's that gust front. Yeah, not a whole lot of rain out of it, but man, that can pack a punch for winds. And people are mentioning, like you said, Fort Smith, still very windy. Yeah, you can see that the velocity here, the bright colors, it's still pretty strong winds, but there's not even a whole lot of rain. That's just kind of what this system is doing. It's getting the strong winds aloft and pushing it towards the south. So let's kind of recap here. We've got some folks in northwest Arkansas, northern northwest Arkansas, saying like, hey, what's going on? Are we going to see this? So if you live anywhere from West Fork north, no. We're not expecting any of this criteria. Maybe a little bit of light to moderate rain moving through, maybe some brief gusts of wind, but we're not expecting any severe weather out of this. What this little gust front is going to do, potentially, is give us the potential of more redevelopment later today. So that is why there is a level 1 out of 5 risk for areas south of I-40, for potential redevelopment. This could be more of those gusty winds and heavy rain, maybe some brief small hail, but for the most part, looking at some pretty strong winds here south I-40. So that is in place for later today. Again, nothing widespread out of this, but 1 or 2 storms like we're seeing right now could turn severe. So for those in northwest Arkansas, again, from West Fork northward, not expecting anything. Okay, so it looks like they just extended that severe thunderstorm warning. This is in effect here until I think this is going to be 11:45 for this severe thunderstorm warning. Dominic, your mic's off. You're good. So this is going to be through noon, This is through Clarksville, New Blaine, and Paris. Now extending this into Johnson County and the rest of Logan County. Again, this continues to be for 60-mile-per-hour winds, as well as maybe some very small hail, but primarily looking at winds and looking at maybe some rainfall. But even again, you see this gust front here not producing a whole lot of rain. It's still just these winds that are very strong in the region. So that is going to be until noon for Johnson County and Logan County, just extending off of what we already saw there. So again, you can see that little curve there. Thank you, Dominic. That whole little curve there just from the region. And your mic, oh yeah, mic is back on. That curve there from that gust front, that's those strong winds moving through the area, and still a lot of lightning, a lot of heavy rain moving through I-49. So got some new comments here. Just looks like people are saying, yeah, like, oh, just light rain, just kind of blowing around North Van Buren up off Highway 222. Some trees down and a transformer blew, so probably unfortunately more power outages there in Van Buren and in Crawford County. Actually, Dominic, if you don't mind, just seeing kind of what those power outages now look like again for the region.
Sure. Yeah, Crawford County is still holding steady right now. Of course, there can be a little bit of a delay with reporting these outages. I'm sure we'll see these numbers increase, but right now, still just over 1,800 customers without power in Crawford County. That's roughly about 7 to 10% of the county. So there's certainly a lot of folks that are being impacted by these storms, especially when you're dealing with these types of winds running around 60 miles per hour. That can certainly knock out power across the area.
It absolutely can. So thank you, Dominic. Yeah. So we are seeing, again, those strong winds continue to move through the area, and gusts around, again, 50 to 60 miles per hour. That continues to be the case for really much of the river valley, kind of near the I-40 corridor, but even a little bit south of there, kind of where you're seeing it just in Logan County, a little bit of southern Franklin County, Sebastian County, seeing still some pretty strong winds there. Scott County, probably seeing 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts, even though not necessarily in the line of sight there of any severe thunderstorm warning, not a whole lot of rain either. It's still packing quite a bit of a punch. So it is still pretty strong, and they're moving through the region at about, again, moving at about 40 miles per hour. So let's put another track on this here. Let's go to about, I'm gonna go even a little bit farther south of this. We'll go to roughly about an hour past. So White Rock Mountain at 11:15, Ozark at 11:19, Boonville at 11:23, Cass at 11:27, Paris at 11:29, Birds Adventure Center 11:34, St. Paul at 11:39, Cove Lake 11:41, Mount Magazine State Park 11:45, Clarksville 11:49, New Blaine 11:54, Havana 11:58, Delaware 12:05, Arkansas Nuclear 1, the power plant there in Russellville 12:09, and Danville at 12:13. So again, this is for severe thunderstorm warning in effect officially until now noon for our far eastern areas there in Johnson and Logan County for winds as high as 60 to 70 miles per hour. So there's going to be some very strong winds moving through, even if you're not necessarily seeing these strong winds, or necessarily doesn't look that impressive on radar. You can certainly see that it is pretty gusty there. Let's see if we can, Dominic, if you don't mind, let's go back to maybe Mountainburg. Let's see what the winds look like in the Mountainburg traffic camera when you get a second. Thank you.
Yeah, we're at exit 29. We have that pulled up, and still some very gusty winds. It doesn't look like this is letting up anytime soon. The rain certainly whipping across the road there, and not a lot of folks out there. That's a good thing. Certainly don't want anybody caught up in this. As you saw earlier, there was some folks that were sheltered under that overpass, and the heaviest of the rain and the wind right now is pretty much located directly over Mountainburg, including Chester. Also some folks in the Facebook live stream there talking about some of the crazy winds that they're seeing in Chester. So when we were looking at the velocity or the wind earlier, we could see that the bulk of that wind was kind of right over Chester, running here in about the 50 to 60 mile per hour range there. The trees going sideways there. No shortage of wind. And this continues to move pretty much due east. This complex of storms, I wouldn't say moving terribly fast or terribly slow. They're moving east here at around 40 miles per hour, producing winds of 60 miles per hour. And we're going to continue to watch this until it moves out of the area. And something that we keep emphasizing, Danny and I have been saying, even if you're not seeing necessarily intense rainfall, you're seeing some very gusty winds, because that gust front, that's the leading line of that storm, Danny, extends over, nearly 40, 50 miles.
Yeah, no, it's still, again, very strong. Like, even though, like you said, yeah, you might be noticing radar, you might be checking, you're like, what? Why is this warm? Like, I don't understand. There's not, because usually you associate, obviously, a severe thunderstorm, like maybe more the classic setup in Mountainburg, right? Like what we saw there. You see the heavy rain, you see the lightning. But if you were to be like an Ozark right now, you might be thinking, really? Like, or Charleston even, really? But when you have a wind or gust front this noticeable on radar, that's saying something, because usually when you have a gust front, it's, a little bit out ahead of it, but this is a distinct front to say, hey, these winds are strong along this. And that is why we're warned, or the National Weather Service, has warned all of down through Charleston. And even if you're in Boonville there in Logan County, or even as far south as Tate, maybe Waldron even, there's still a pretty distinct line here. There still could be some strong gusts around 40 miles per hour. So Boonville not technically underneath the severe thunderstorm warning, but still could be pretty strong. Paris there, going to probably see some strong wind gusts here in the next 15 minutes or so. So yeah, some very strong winds still seeing there. Now, I know people have been wondering about the tornado threat. Again, I want to emphasize, we are not expecting anything tornadic out of this. When we have what we have right now, I will look, I'll just make sure we don't. But yeah, again, I'm not seeing any rotation out of this. What you're seeing there, you might be seeing a curve there. You're like, well, that doesn't look good. And that's just the gust front. That's that front that's really, the only shift in direction is when you have these winds aloft. So the winds aloft right now are pretty much out of the west. For the surface, they're out of the north. So when you go backwards like that, when you go up in direction, that's called a backing wind. And that usually demotes or limits tornado potential. So we are not expecting that. But we are expecting those gusts to continue probably through the rest of Johnson and Logan County here, but we are not expecting any tornado there. So it looks like people are saying power outages in Mountainburg. I mean, that makes sense. The bulk of those winds there in Mountainburg were pretty strong. If we were to kind of take some guesses there at the winds, around 50, 55 miles per hour, close to 60 there. Cedarville, even behind it, still some pretty strong winds there, probably around 50 to 60 miles per hour there. Yes, still some pretty strong winds there moving through the region. And again, it does not look like this will let up anytime soon, because it does look like we still have plenty of energy to work with here. So if we're going to pull up the storm fuel, it takes a little bit to load. But you're noticing, well, you notice first where there are storms, you can see a little bit of that lower, but some pretty good energy here off to our east in Clarksville and parts of Logan County. So there is still some energy to work with here, and that's why I don't think they'll necessarily let up anytime soon. They might weaken slightly, but I'm not expecting to just fizzle out as it goes through the rest of the morning here. So let me take another look here as we go through the area. Let's back up and kind of reset again. So if you live in really much of northwest Arkansas, we're not expecting any redevelopment here that's of this nature. We could see maybe a few spotty storms, but most of it I think will be south of I-40. Severe thunderstorm warnings in effect here until 12 o'clock for Johnson and Logan County. Once this kind of storm passes through, then we'll see a break, but we could maybe see some redevelopment later today. I think it'll mainly be this complex, but we'll have to watch for later this afternoon, this evening. Do we see anything pulse back up? And that's why we do have a level 1 out of 5 risk for strong to maybe low-end severe storms. South I-40, this was issued by the Storm Prediction Center earlier this morning, and a new update comes out at 11:30 that will, readdress this risk. I think this will probably stay in place. We'll keep an eye on it nonetheless. In terms of kind of the rest of the region, you kind of see to the southeast of Waldron there towards Little Rock. Yeah, there's a little bit of activity there, but for the most part, that'll stay to the southeast. I'm not expecting any of that, obviously, to turn backwards. Northwest Arkansas, again, you can see a little bit of a light to moderate shower there, not a whole lot of lightning. So those in Benton County, maybe seeing a little bit of a light to moderate shower, but nothing that's going to turn severe and nothing that looks to be strengthening at all. So that main complex, again, is going to be now moving towards into Franklin County. So Ozark, actually, Dominic Carrico with me right now. If you don't mind checking the Ozark camera, I want to see if anything's moving in terms of winds there. But because you can see where that green line is, and that's what we've been emphasizing all morning, this green line, that's where this gust front is, basically kind of a whoosh of wind. You see these kind of clouds stacked together, and that really picks up the wind once this passes over, and then some rain usually follows it, of course. But even farther to the south towards Charleston, not a whole lot of rain, pretty strong winds. So let's see.
Let's see here.
So there's still, again, good amount of lightning in this area, about 150 bolts. Maybe not as much as earlier, but still pretty strong storms and still pretty gusty winds. You can see probably Mountainburg area, maybe even seeing some very small hail as well, just because of how heavy that rain is. Alma, even though not a whole lot of rain, still, again, a whole lot of strong winds. So towards the area of Cass, Ozark, seeing some strong winds right now. Back towards the south, Charleston, still seeing some gusty winds. Boonville about to see a pretty strong gust of wind here. Mansfield just saw that about 10 minutes ago. Tate there in Scott County, even the south end of that, seeing some pretty strong gusts. So some pretty strong winds, again, along this gust front, even though there's not a whole lot of rain associated with this.
Yeah, certainly some dark skies right now, Danny, in Ozark. The leading edge of that line of wind is about to approach into, let's say, making its way soon into Franklin County, but still kind of just on the edge there of Crawford County. And kind of right along Interstate 40 is where we're looking at here at exit 37 in Ozark. Some dark skies. We're going to watch this leading line here. It should start to rain any moment, but certainly the wind has been the story today, regardless if folks are seeing heavy rain or not. Everyone along the leading edge of this line, we call it a gust front, is seeing some pretty gusty conditions.
Yeah, I was say as you've been talking, this camera's trying its best to hang on. There's some pretty strong winds. So this is the gust front. So let me first go back to the radar, and then let me show you this again. So again, that's this gust front here is going right over Ozark as we speak. That little green line. There's not a whole lot of rain out of it, but that gust front's going over Ozark as we speak. And if we go back to the camera now, you can see how strong these winds are as it moves through. So they're very strong winds. You see the trees rustling a little bit. There's that camera shaking quite a bit. So yeah, not a whole lot of rain. You might be thinking, why is it so windy? That's that gust front, that air aloft that's getting sent to the ground and spreading out just because of that heavy air, that cold and dense air. It's going to spreading down and spreading at the surface. So it's a pretty strong winds moving through the area as we speak here. You can see, look at that, just rocking the place all across Ozark. This is just kind of an idea of what we've been seeing move through for areas like Mountainburg, or areas like Tahlequah earlier this morning, areas like Muldrow, Sallisaw, and Sequoyah County. We've been seeing some very strong winds roll through here that, again, even though if we go back again to radar, didn't see a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot showing up. You only see a little bit of a light green, but that's an idea of what that gust front is producing as those winds are rolling through. Some very strong winds at that. So again, severe thunderstorm warning in effect to 11:45 for, this is going to be for Crawford County and parts of Sebastian County. And then for Johnson County here and Logan County, this is going to be until noon. For areas like Clarksville, New Blaine, Paris, does not include the city of Boonville, but this little gust front does extend a little bit farther east. That does extend, excuse me, farther south. So even if you're not in the warning, I still would say, hey, there's still going to be some gusty winds, especially south of the region there. Looks like we're getting reports now from Crawford County Emergency Management. About 11:22, report of power outages and trees down in the Natural Dam area there in Crawford County. So if we pull up the reports, going to see that these are still kind of coming in. Again, these are some strong winds, especially from that gust front as it moves through. So it's going to be there in northwestern Crawford County, and just northwest of Cedarville and the Crawford County Speedway. And as I just mentioned, this was at about 10:50 this morning, just about 35 minutes ago. Power outages down there in Crawford County from emergency management. So let's go back to velocity, kind of showing you again where these gusty winds are. You can kind of see right up along this gust front here, kind of through Mountainburg towards Cass, Ozark, now seeing these winds. Charleston, Boonville, seeing some pretty gusty winds as well. Even behind it, too, in areas like Mountainburg and Alma, still seeing some pretty strong winds there. And as we saw in Ozark, it's still kind of rocking the camera a little bit. It's some strong winds rolling through there, even though on velocity, it may not look that impressive. If we were to just kind of, check this out, 50 miles per hour. Well, 50 is still pretty strong. Let me get away here. 50 miles per hour. That's still pretty strong winds moving through the area. But it does look like that, again, we're still going to see this probably extend into the rest of the region along the I-40 corridor here into areas like Johnson and Logan counties. If you're in Johnson or Logan County, Boonville probably right now seeing some pretty strong winds start to pick up. Paris just about to see those strong winds pick up. Clarksville, I'd say in about the next 20 minutes or so, let's see those strong winds pick up. This again will extend from west to east through the region. And winds still pretty strong off to the west as well. Behind it, Mountainburg, Alma, even Fort Smith still seeing a little bit of a gust of wind every now and then. So let's show you again reflectivity, or what you may think of as radar. And on that radar, again, areas like Alma, Fort Smith, there's not a lot of rain. That just doesn't matter, though. There's still some very strong winds still kind of hanging out in the area. Now, I will say, if we were to kind of take this over the last hour, it does look like the rain element of this has started to diminish. I'm not saying the winds, because the winds still look pretty strong, but the rain has maybe kind of slightly shrunk. Not a ton, though. So I'm just looking for any weakening here, but the lightning count, yeah, still at about 193. So especially in northern Crawford and Franklin County. So for those that get in the Mountainburg area, Franklin County towards White Rock Mountain, Cass, Mulberry, seeing some strong heavy rain right now. Yeah, still some pretty strong winds there. Let's see, Dominic, if you don't mind pulling up Mulberry, the camera. That's going to be exit 24, what that looks like in the Mulberry area. So yeah, we'll kind of see that. Yeah, there's some pretty strong winds kind of flowing through those areas still at this moment. And some pretty decent rainfall as well. If we were to show you, so let's see the 12-hour rainfall estimate. Sometimes it's not like to play along with us. It's not like to load. But I'm curious to see the rainfall rates because there was some pretty decent rain rolling through here. And we'll definitely take it. Unfortunately, that doesn't really necessarily lead to any drought breakage. But it does help that, hey, we're getting at least a little bit of rain to relieve us here. Yeah, nothing right now. Okay, we'll come back to that. Oh, it's just loading up. But anyway, we'll come back to that. But yeah, you can see that, again, it's this leading edge here that is still kind of tracking from west to east. It does look like the National Weather Service in Tulsa trimmed a little bit of the southern component of this box. So now southern Franklin County not technically in it, but still, even if you're in southern Franklin County, still could maybe see some gustier winds around 45 to 50 miles per hour. Let's see. Okay.
Well, this warning, Danny, goes until 11:45, so we have another, let's say, around 15 minutes until this technically expires. But it looks like, as we speak, they might have extended that eastward.
Yeah, so that was that original warning around noon. So we'll see if that may extend that one, just because it is still kind of hanging out a little bit. But there's this look here in Mulberry. So this is along I-40 at exit 24. You can see the winds are rocking here. The rain is rocking. Rain's not even moving up and down. You can kind of see it's almost like coming at your picture. Because again, we're looking westbound here. It's moving from west to east. It's almost coming into your phone or wherever you're watching. Ooh, there's some pretty strong winds going through here. So it's very strong winds, so very heavy rain in the center of the storm, the heart of the storm. But as we've been talking about, even if you're not in the center of the storm, even not ahead of it, or even behind it, we're still seeing some pretty gusty winds there as well. So that's a look in the Mulberry area along I-40 at exit 24. Some pretty gusty winds there and some heavy rainfall to boot. Let's see, again, if we're seeing anything kind of different here pop up again. So we're still seeing that heavy rainfall. As we mentioned, this warning goes until 11:45. The eastern part of this, it goes until noon, but that will probably be extended. But you can see that line kind of moving through as we speak. So the gust front there passed through Ozark, but Ozark about to see some heavy downpours pretty soon here. Paris about to see some gusts move through Clarksville probably in the next 15 minutes or so. New Blaine there in probably the next 20 minutes or so, seeing some gusty winds start to roll through the area. And I want to just see if we can look at, I have a Fort Smith camera here. I just want to look to see what the trees look like, even with no rainfall. I mean, yeah, it's still, I mean, you're seeing sunshine. You're seeing sunshine here, and there's still some pretty gusty winds. Not as strong as they were earlier, but you can still see a decent tree rustle. We kind of get these kind of wake winds, they're called, kind of the remnants of the lines that move through, and it's still gusting pretty decently in Fort Smith. So, yeah, even though we're not necessarily seeing anything that are, we're not seeing any rain in Fort Smith, it's still gusting pretty decently, even if that line moved through. Looks like we got a report out of Franklin County in Coxville there, excuse me, northern Logan County in Coxville, reporting gusts front about 50 to 60 mile per hour winds and power outages there. So, Dominic, if you don't mind, just kind of refreshing that power outage page and see if we have any new updates on those power outages.
Sure.
Dominic Carrico with me this morning. First little taste of severe weather. We've been kind of thankful to not see a whole lot recently since he's been here, but that also has meant we haven't seen a whole lot of rain. So we will definitely take the rain. It's just unfortunate that it has to come with these winds. So Dominic, whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and fire those off.
Just looking at our Ozark camera, and it's not raining heavily, but definitely breezy, and that seems to be a trend across the area, Danny.
Yeah. We pulled that up here for you just to kind of see what he's talking about here. And yeah, you can see the wind kind of shaking there a little bit. And we're looking kind of into the storm here. We're going to see some rain start to push in here fairly soon in Ozark. So although we're not seeing the rain right now, you can kind of see that rain shaft, it's called. That's going to push into the region. Ozark going to probably see some heavy rain here pretty quickly, probably the next few minutes or so. But you can see that camera shaking quite a bit in the Ozark area.
Yeah, an update on those power outages in Oklahoma now, eastern Oklahoma. We're seeing a good amount of folks without power now in Adair County. Nearly 3,000 customers are without power. Sequoia County now seeing around 1,600 outages. So we have definitely caught up now that the storms have had some time to move through. A lot of folks here in the dark. Crawford County, there is now 5,600 customers without power. That's a significant increase here within the last half hour. And Franklin County now seeing around 800 folks without power.
Yeah, thank you, Dominic. Yeah, Crawford County, yeah, that's about a quarter of customers in Crawford County without power. It's, excuse me, just under a quarter, about 22%. So that is a significant amount of people that, as that moved through, those gusts really powered through. So the good news is at least the bulk of the storm in Crawford County is starting to push out. So we should get some relief soon. That does mean, again, areas like Franklin County, Logan County, Johnson County. We saw a report near Coxville about 50 to 60 mile per hour winds. So as that gust front continues to move through, this is what we've been seeing. Power outages, tree limbs have been down. There was some damage in Tahlequah. I'm sure some other areas across the region seeing that damage in the area. So those power outages, again, thank you, Dominic, for that. Want to add to, I think, Sebastian County, only 266 customers, so just under 1% of customers there. So mostly looking at Crawford County and Franklin County in Arkansas, and then Adair County and Sequoia County in Oklahoma, at least in our neck of the woods. Cherokee County in Oklahoma has seen numerous power outages there. That's just off to our west. They have seen over 5,000 customers without power, but as Dominic mentioned, just under 3,000 there in Adair County. So we'll reset here again. Let's kind of map things out. So this is the only storm we're really concerned about right now. We are seeing a little bit of some spotty storms behind it. I don't think this will turn into anything too crazy, but we will have to watch for, again, as that complex has now moved through, it has kind of set the stage for maybe a few other storms to develop later today during the afternoon hours. That is why the Storm Prediction Center has issued, oops, I got a little ahead of myself. The Storm Prediction Center has issued a level 1 out of 5 that extends back towards Oklahoma City. Kind of looks like a banana almost. It swings through the area here along and south of I-40. So that is for our area. In terms of the storms themselves, again, in terms of northwest Arkansas, looks to be very minimal activity, a little bit of light to moderate rain, maybe some brief gusty winds, but nothing severe expected. This activity southeast of Waldron, there's Little Rock, that'll continue to kind of move that direction. But this complex, again, might lay the foundation of maybe a little bit of rainfall continuing here over the next couple of hours or so, maybe seeing a little bit of some redevelopment. But right now, the strongest activity is in northeastern Crawford County. It is in Franklin County, and then now extending through southern Logan County. And again, even if you're in Boonville there or Waldron, probably seeing some gusty winds move through as we speak, just because we are noticing that gust front extends southward. So Waldron Public Schools started today. And, Waldron, maybe you were the good luck charm. You went back to school finally and said, hey, now we can see some rainfall. Unfortunately, just had to come with some wind gusts. I'm not going to blame that on you, though. Don't worry. As we go through the region here, you're noticing that, again, seen some heavy rainfall and the kind of bulk of these storms kind of north of Ozark here. You can see where all that lightning is. It's the southwest of Cass. So that's where we're seeing some very heavy rainfall and some gusty winds. But even though we're seeing rainfall there, you can see, that's a pretty strong gust there. Let's see there, just south of Cass. So about 60 to 65 miles per hour there. It's probably a little bit high, just because, again, this is a little bit away from the radar, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were seeing around that range closer to the surface, especially because that is more of an elevated surface to begin with. So if we go to kind of show you like reflectivity, so you can kind of see where that gust front is, kind of where things start to taper off here just through Paris, Boonville, Mount Magazine State Park. It's continuing to move kind of through the north. We are seeing that kind of push through, and then through areas like Cass towards Clarksville, seeing that gust front kind of move through there. So, Dominic, I know you have a noon show to do. I'm going to let you prepare for that. If you want to do that on Max 2, set up your show, and then we can kind of, once we get close to the noon, we can kind of arrange things. Sure. And then kind of get that figured out. So I'll mute your mic here. I got you. So just some kind of logistics behind the scenes. We've got our noon show, of course, at noon, and Dominic Carrico will continue to talk about these storms. By then, it'll probably be kind of centered around Johnson and eastern Logan County, but we'll stay with you through pretty much the entire range here. We just got to make sure to say, hey, this is what we're looking at right now. This is what we're doing. And then we'll kind of have to do a little bit of some kind of in or out things here where we kind of have to stay with the stream, kind of switch things over to prepare for the noon. We'll get to the noon and kind of go from there. But for right now, we'll continue to track on. And again, very strong winds now. The bulk of it looks to be more in Franklin County now for areas to south of Cass, Ozark, kind of towards areas just to the west of Coal Hill there, which is in Johnson County, Roseville there, Coxville. That's where we saw that 50 to 60 mile per hour gusts, some strong winds still rolling through the area. And again, although some of that is in the heavy rainfall, a good portion of it is not, especially for, again, areas in Logan County. Seeing some spotty storms kind of pop up out of it, but the bulk of that rain is still sitting in areas like Franklin County, and then not as much lightning now in Crawford County, so still seeing some strong gusts in Crawford County, but where the strongest of the winds is going to be where this very frequent lightning is near Cass and Ozark. So a lot of lightning continuing to track eastward through the area there. So I know we've been on the live stream for Facebook for quite a while, so see if there's any kind of things going on here. And yeah, I think the main message here, as people have been saying, is, yeah, we've got some very strong winds, but even the rainfall is just very limited. It's just, there's not a whole lot. That's kind of the surprising thing, is that without the rain, it just, you don't necessarily think like, oh, well, we're going to see anything, but there's some very strong winds kind of rolling through. So yeah, we've been seeing people, again, winds very strong, over 60 miles per hour, even just, again, without the rainfall. So this continues to track eastward around 40 miles per hour. Let's put a track on new areas here as it continues to move to the east about 40 miles per hour. So I'll put a little bit of some, actually I'm going to zoom this out a little bit because this is going to extend. I mean, again, you can see even, I would say even Scott County right now, Waldron area is probably seeing some gusty winds as we speak here. So we'll take it to about Just out ahead of this here. Yeah, not my best drawing, but we'll take this to the edge of the region. So Subiaco here at 11:38, Cove Lake 11:44, Spadra there 11:46, Clarksville 11:48, Lamar at 11:55, New Blaine at 11:57, Gillian Settlement at noon, Havana at 12:03, Delaware there at 12:08, the Arkansas Nuclear 1 power plant at 12:12. It starts to exit the area there towards Russellville at 12:23, excuse me, and Dardanelle there at 12:25. So I would say it probably, the gust front at least, will probably exit around noon. But these gusty winds will probably continue through probably around 12:15, 12:30. Really won't see the strongest of the winds until this complex near Mountainburg exits. But even behind it, we're still seeing some strong winds. I know people have been saying in Alma, we're still seeing some pretty gusty winds there. Even though there's no rain there, it's still kind of left over from these kind of gusty winds that are in the area. So if we were to go back to reflectivity, or excuse me, to go back to velocity, still some pretty gusty winds in that area. I'd say towards close to Alma, probably seeing good maybe 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts there. Yeah, here's negative 39 again. Negative just means that it's going towards the radar, but about 40 mile per hour gusts there in the range. So still some gusty winds even after the bulk of the storms still roll through. In terms of, again, maybe if you're watching from Northwest Arkansas, you hopped on Facebook or you hopped on the stream and you're like, what? Severe thunderstorms. So looks to primarily be looks to be pretty much in the river valley. And one thing you're noticing too is after these storms roll through, quite a bit of a cool down. 77 in Sallisaw, 81 in Fort Smith, but still pretty warm there in Poto. It did cool off a little bit though, even with that little gust of wind in Poto down to 86. So that's going to help us today. Even though, unfortunately, we did see these strong winds, we'll definitely take some rain. Just, again, unfortunately, just all the winds. Now, Northwest Arkansas, I'm not expecting much rainfall out of this. You can see just some light rainfall, but we could see some brief gusty winds as well. This is going to continue to track off to the east towards Johnson and Logan County. Again, we do have the potential of redevelopment later today. That's why there is a level 1 out of 5 risk for areas along and south of I-40 for some stronger storms possible, meaning some gusty winds, maybe some heavy rainfall, and maybe some small hail, but for the most part, looking at gusty winds, heavy rain, and some lightning. So that would be for redevelopment later today. This complex that we're sitting on right now is kind of where things are, maybe setting the stage for activity later today. So if we were to look at this here, you can kind of see where that's set up. So again, in areas like Franklin County, just north of Ozark, seeing some very strong winds in Ozark, seeing some heavy rainfall. In fact, let's see if we can pull up the Ozark camera. Now we're going to probably see some heavy rainfall. And yeah, you can see the river there. You can see almost like the condensation, the fog, the water vapor condensing off the river as you're getting that warm air pushing over a little bit of a cooler body of water. They kind of make this is how fog really forms. You're seeing that fog kind of come off the river. And you're also noticing the camera's shaking a good amount. There's some strong winds out of this. That rain is not dropping vertically. It's almost moving horizontally across the board. So there's some very heavy rainfall as well as those very gusty winds. Again, this is an idea. If you're in Johnson County or Eastern Logan County, haven't seen these winds quite yet, this is kind of an idea of what we can expect. But even if you're outside of the rain, it's still going to be very strong winds. But that's what we've been seeing all morning is that, yeah, okay, obviously you're expecting the bulk of the winds to be where the heavy rain is. But even in areas where there's not a whole lot of rain, probably areas, Paris, Boonville probably saw some gusty winds. So Mount Magazine State Park, New Blaine, Clarksville, we're probably about 5 minutes away from this crossing over. You can see some strong winds there kind of moving through the region. So yes, there's some very strong winds, even though there's not a whole lot of rain out of it that is moving through. Now Crawford County there, Mountainburg, still seeing some heavy rainfall. Some winds probably died down a little bit, but still some strong winds nonetheless as we're going through the area. But yeah, very strong winds moving throughout the area. And yeah, someone just mentioned Kibler, 60 mile per hour winds, not a drop of rain. That's how some of this is going, especially on that south end. You might not see any rain, but you're going to see those winds. People are saying very heavy rain, strong winds. Mountainburg, people pull on the side of the road, limited visibility. Yeah, it's tough to drive out there. Again, as I mentioned earlier, please do not pull under a overpass if you don't have to, because again, that's going to block emergency vehicles, get to where they need to go, and almost can create a suction, almost like a vacuum, almost of elevated winds. So again, this is the current only severe thunderstorm warning in the area, and now you see the lightning at 2:40. So again, yeah, this is not let up This is not going to lighten up. This is still going to roll through the area, and this is going to stay pretty strong. To head towards Johnson County, you can see that gust front there. Clarksville, going to see these winds here in a couple minutes in Johnson County. Also areas like New Blaine and eastern Logan County going to see this. And those back off to the west towards Crawford County, Fort Smith, eastern Oklahoma. We're good for now. Still going to probably see some gusts still kind of hanging out. We see this wake low, it's called, where those winds are kind of residual winds kind of left over. And we still could see that, but the severe winds are going to be done, at least hopefully for the rest of the day. If not, maybe for at least a little while, unless we see any redevelopment later today. So there's that gust front. Again, that's where those winds initiate, and then that kind of whoosh, and then you get that heavy rain, most likely to fall, but even then, seeing some gusty winds out ahead of it as well. So that's continuing to move through. So Franklin County seeing the bulk of that now, especially north I-40, but even south I-40, kind of anywhere along this line, seeing some gusty winds. Johnson County there, moving through the area of Clarksville. Logan County there. Actually, a matter of fact, I'm going to go just take a minute here to look at the traffic camera here. I'm curious in Clarksville here what we're going to be seeing for anything. Actually, we do have an accident in the Van Buren area along I-40. Let's see if we can see anything there. So this, I'm not sure if this is related to storms, but I will pull this up regardless. So this is going to be on I-40 near exit 7 in Van Buren. There's an accident here that is slowing down traffic. So let me pull this up. Doing weather and traffic this morning. Didn't expect that, but here's a look westbound. Again, this is near exit 7 I-40, so you can see multiple emergency crews on site here. And this is westbound I-40 headed towards Oklahoma in the Van Buren area near exit, just past exit 7. You can see there is exit 5. So I will say it again, this is one of the reasons why, obviously this is not an underpass, but you do not want to park under an underpass because emergency vehicles need to get through, and for instance like this. So again, if you're traveling westbound towards Oklahoma along I-40, this is just before exit 5. Be mindful there that there is, again, westbound there on the right shoulder, emergency vehicles on hand. So again, hopefully everyone's okay. But that is the current scene there along I-40 westbound. I did want to look, again, I'll go back here. I did want to look at the Clarksville area as that gust front's approaching, what those winds look like. So let's go to, if we were to go a little bit off to the east. So if we were to go Clarksville here, this is I-40 exit 55. Nothing going there in Clarksville, at least quite yet. So it is still a little bit calm before the storm, so to speak. But if we were to go back here towards Coal Hill, see I-40 exit 47, it's bustling a little bit. There's quite a bit of rain in the area, and even though, actually, I will say not even a ton of rain, but just a little bit of rain, and those winds are pretty strong there in Coal Hill. This is along I-40 at exit 47, and it kicked me out. Coal Hill said no more. That's fine. That's fair. So that's what's kind of going around in the region, and that's kind of an idea, again, for those in Johnson County and eastern Logan County that haven't necessarily seen these winds yet. That's kind of an idea of what we can expect. You can see, again, that bowing segment, that green line as it's spreading out. Those are those winds that are, again, coming from the base of the storm. It's cold, heavy air up there. Cold air is dense. It wants to sink. So it sinks, comes down pretty fast, and then it spreads out. So even though we're maybe not necessarily seeing any rain on the southern end of this, we're still seeing some strong winds, and you can see that there against Clarksville, stretching through all the way Scott County, maybe even a little bit farther south of Scott County as well. Curious to see, sometimes when you have this flow kind of interact with some storms, that can undercut it or also can enhance these storms. I'm curious what that's going to look like. But again, right now, severe thunderstorm warning in effect for, now technically Franklin County is not underneath this, but this is where, again, it just becomes a little bit more of logistics for National Weather Service offices. So Franklin County is under the Tulsa jurisdiction, Johnson County, Logan County underneath the Little Rock jurisdiction. So that expired at 11:45, but that's not to say there's still not very strong winds here in Franklin County. So even though we're not seeing a severe thunderstorm warning, still would be in your shelter in Franklin County until the bulk of this rain passes, because obviously there's a lot of it. And there's also the fact that there's a lot of lightning out of this as well as some pretty strong winds. Mountainburg, let's take a look at the Mountainburg camera. I'm curious what that looks like now as things are starting to lighten up in terms of rainfall there. Maybe not seeing as strong of winds as we saw earlier, but probably still seeing brief gusts of wind. So, okay, a little bit of a quieter scene here, but there is still a little bit of rainfall. Let's go to I-49 at exit 29. That will be the Mountainburg exit. As we look along the interstate here, again, a little bit of a quieter picture. It obviously is pretty wet, which, hey, we need the rain. We just hoped it would be without the wind. But the winds, a little bit quieter, a little bit of a rustle in the trees. It hasn't stopped, but it is a little bit quieter there in the river valley. You can almost see again as the car's coming off like that water vapor. It's just so muggy. You can see it kind of condensed into that water vapor, that gas in the air. So a little bit of a quieter picture. So yeah, as the rain passes, it will lighten up. It's not, going to be windy forever. But that's a look in Mountainburg there, and you can see if we go back to the radar, again, that's where it is a lot quieter now. You can see Mountainburg, just a little bit of that light to moderate rain, but nothing quite like we saw earlier with that area. I do want to go to some power outages here. I want to see how things have updated here. So in Adair County, looking at 3,195 customers without power in Adair County. That's just right at about a third of customers in Adair County are without power. Sequoia County at just over 10% of their customers at about 1,700 customers without power. Let's go to Arkansas here. I want to check what's going on here. We've got Crawford County at just about a quarter of customers without power, over 6,000, just about 6,100. Franklin County, over 30% of customers without power at 2,500. And then now even Logan County, some reports coming in at about 472 customers, just over 4%. And then Scott County, even a handful at 136, just about 2% of the population there. So again, Scott County has not been warned at all, but even with this little gust front here, that's enough to blow over some trees, blow over some power lines. That's where that strong winds are. So now we're looking at that gust front kind of moving through the Clarksville area. You can see where things might be picking up now. So let me go back to Clarksville. Let's see if we can see those winds kind of pushing through the region. I'd be curious to see how that's looking here. But we can see those strong winds kind of moving into the area in Clarksville. So let's go to I-40-55. Okay, yeah, you can see a little bit. It's hard to tell, but let me pull this camera up for us. It is going to be some pretty gusty winds. Nothing in terms of rain yet because it's still out of the area, but you can kind of get an idea a little bit of the trees, especially if you look behind me here. You kind of see those trees rustling a little bit. Again, it's not the greatest quality camera, but you can tell these trees rustling like, yeah, there's some winds coming. You can see it again over here on your left side. Yeah, it's shaking a little bit. There's a little bit of wind in the area. And again, as we've been talking about, that's kind of the idea of this kind of winds in the area. Okay, so we're just under 10 minutes for the news at noon. So I'm going to get some guidance, hopefully, from our booth here, how we want to handle this with the stream, because Amos of the cut-in. Okay, so I got to end it before then. So I think what we're going to do here is at about 11:55, I'm going to end the stream. What we are going to do is we're going to continue the stream on 5 News and the 5 News Plus app. It'll just pick right back up on our 5 News Plus app and on over the air. We'll be doing the news at noon. Dominic Carrico will be there live, as well as Morgan Wrigley, talking about these storms and talking about the many power outages and damage we've seen in the region. So around 11:55, we'll end the stream. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, we'll be right back over on the 5 News Plus app and over the air as these storms continue to track eastward in the area. But again, you can see in Johnson County and Franklin County still some pretty strong winds, as well as in Logan County. There's where those strong winds are. Again, these will be rolling through the area over the next half hour. I'd say by about 12:30, this will probably exit the region completely. And then we'll have to watch for, again, later today, what does that look like in terms of redevelopment? So again, the Storm Prediction Center still has a level 1 out of 5 risk in place for potential redevelopment as we go through the rest of the afternoon. This is for maybe those strong wind gusts around 60 miles per hour, heavy rainfall, maybe a brief lightning bolt or two, or a lot of lightning, I should say, and maybe some small hail. But for the most part, it's going to be the winds, some rainfall, and some lightning. In terms of kind of anything outside of that complex right now, a little bit of light to moderate rain in Delaware County, kind of approaching northwest Arkansas, but that's been falling apart as it's getting here. So looks like primarily looking to be in the River Valley if we were to see any redevelopment later today. For now, our biggest concern right now still remains in Franklin County, Franklin County, Johnson County, Logan County, then even a little bit in Scott County, seeing those gusty winds. Once that complex does roll through, then we will be seeing, again, a little bit of a break, just watching for redevelopment. You can see the lightning count has actually gone up. We've seen that lightning go up, especially in Franklin County. Let's see if we can go back to Ozark here. Looking at some very strong winds here. Very strong winds. You're seeing some rain. And again, this is now looking off to the west. So outside of it, yeah, they're seeing some blue sky. You're like, hey, look at that. It looks great. But we are seeing some pretty pretty heavy rain there at times, and also some pretty gusty winds. You can see the camera shaking there. Let me just take 1 second to tilt this camera, just kind of show you what I'm looking at here, because if we're to tilt it to the east, where we're seeing these strong winds, we're like, Danny, that's not how. You're like, oh, okay, now I know what you're talking about, Danny. Yeah, this is what we're talking about here in Ozark. Seeing some pretty strong winds, seeing some lightning, seeing some heavy rain, and yeah, that's just been kind of the theme over the rest of the region. So again, that's what we're seeing right now in Ozark, and we'll continue to see that roll through and see that water splashing off the camera, maybe even some pea-sized hail coming out of that as well. And can't rule out a little bit of small hail, because it almost looked like snow coming down at times, which I'm ready for snow, but I think that might be the vast minority. So again, one more report, it looks like out of Franklin County. Trees and power lines down on North 26th Street, some trees on houses. That is in Ozark there on North 26th Street, and some tree damage on North 29th Street in Ozark there for the police department. So this has certainly done a number across the region. We've seen power lines down, trees down. Crawford County just reported roof damage at the high school in Mountainburg area. So a lot of damage out of this, unfortunately, as these winds have rolled through. Okay, so we're just approaching 11:55 on this Monday morning. Again, we're going to end the stream here very shortly. I'm going to hand over the reins to Dominic Carrico and Morgan Ridley for the news at noon. Again, we're going to end the stream on Facebook and YouTube. This will be kind of the last gasp for a little bit, and we'll have to watch redevelopment later today, but they'll continue to talk about that over on the news at noon. We'll be streaming still on the 5 News Plus app, and then, of course, we'll be still on 5 News over the air. But again, if you're in Johnson, Logan County, even Franklin County, stay in shelter until this storm completely passes through, because we've been seeing wind gusts over about 50 to 60 miles per hour. So again, hopefully everyone's okay from this. Hopefully we can, again, recover as we always do from this damage. But again, we're going to end things now, and then we'll get ready for the news at noon here in just a few minutes.
Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. Mic check. Can you all